Hey everybody in chat, welcome to, I think this is now 3 months of the Hippy Dippy podcast. Welcome to the show. I'm happy to see a lot of new faces. Again, thank you Destiny for the raid, thank you Endernax for the raid, and thank you for the level 3 hype train earlier. I'm really excited to do this one. I'm really excited for this one. We've got a diverse cast of characters. We're missing one person, but he will be here shortly. He's always fashionably late. Everybody's favorite ANCAP last username. We've got a bunch of interesting characters here today. We have a lot of great topics today. Black Lives Matter, Confederate statues, mandatory masks, a lot of amazing topics. For everybody who's new to the channel, my name's Dylan Burns. I stream on Dylan Burns TV, the place you're currently looking at through your screen. And I host debates, but I mostly also talk about foreign policy analysis. I do foreign policy analysis. I was a foreign policy advisor for Senator Jill Carter, state senator, not nearly as cool, but she did run for Congress, and Michaela Wilkes. I also worked on the Mike Gravel campaign. I've loved my time on Twitch. I've been streaming now for I think 7 months, and I'm happy you're here to watch the show. This is probably, this is the most viewers I've ever had, so I'm really excited for it. And let's introduce everybody. Last username will arrive when he's, you know what? And he's right on time. Perfect. We got everybody ready. Oh, God, what is he doing? Where's the last username? This is not... He's crisscross applesaucing this. He's almost always standing up. Okay, that's a new one. But, you know what? He's a smart cookie. He'll figure it out. Let's get in there. Okay.
Are you saying you have lots of NCAP friends? Is that what you're saying?
Where are you? Your last username? Do you need help? What's going on, man? You look like you're being helped.
Moving house.
Yeah, last
Moving
username.
house.
I just came on. I just was like, oh, we're about to start, and I just see you crisscross applesauce this shit, man. Like, what's this?
This is my new place. My new.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you just
Congratulations.
moved. Yeah. Yeah. Welcome.
Congrats.
Is the crisscross applesauce gonna be a thing you do regularly at your new place? Is this your new streaming setup? I love it.
What crisscross? What are you talking about?
Don't worry
Kids
about
in
it.
When you're trying to
Fine.
get a room full of elementary schoolers to sit cross-legged on the floor, you say crisscross applesauce until they giggle and figure it out.
To be fair, we are about to have a Twitch political debate, so everybody should be doing crisscross applesauce. To be completely fair.
Let me move people in the correct manner.
Awesome. Okay, so everybody, welcome to the Hippy Dippy podcast. I'm really excited to have on a lot of new faces. And Destiny, thank you very much for the raid. Helps me a lot. Appreciate it, buddy. Okay, I'm going to go around the room. Everybody's going to introduce themselves. Then I'm going to talk about the rules, so nobody interrupting anybody while they're introducing themselves. I'm going to go through the rules of the podcast. I'm going to go into the first topic. So I'm just going to start from the left-hand corner with Prime. Who are you, my guy?
Oh, hi, that's me. I'm Prime Kai, spelled as you see on the stream, PRIMECYES. I'm a socialist streamer. I give you my opinion on the news and things like that. But what I usually do is a walk-on panel for my audience members where we can all come in and discuss various topics. And I invite all people, people from the left and the right, all are welcome on my panel. So I'd love to have you. And I guess now that people are looking at me, I like to announce that I'm pushing for partner. My goal is to become the first partnered Black leftist streamer. So yeah, doing that now.
Wonderful. Of course, I'll support you in that effort. Next is LTCRfan. Who are you, my guy?
I'm a commercial litigation attorney, been streaming on Twitch for 4 or 5 years now. I'm a conservative, coming at you live from downtown Seattle.
Wonderful. What you doing in Seattle, LTCRfan?
Oh, we just came out here. I'm getting married next month, so I bought a suit today, and fiance bought a wedding dress.
I thought you were joining the protests. Doghouse, what you doing?
What's up, guys? I'm the Doghouse Show. So I figured I'd come in like a firework and just say that I know all the lefties are gonna want to attack my boy LTCRfan, but I just want to say that Killer Steven is the greatest of all time. Done.
Well, you know what? I don't really know how to react to that. Killer Steven, he's a swell guy, but I don't really know if I want to stumble around the room drunk right now. So, Bastiat, you're next.
Hey, my name is Bastiat. I was gone for a while I was moving, but I'm back, and I am a corporate energy attorney by day, and we stream here by night and have a whole lot of fun. So it's good to be here. Thanks for the invite, Dylan.
Wonderful. Suspect Sushi.
It's your boy, Suspect Sushi, aka your friendly neighborhood black conservative, also known as Swole Team 6. I don't eat soy like some of my leftist counterparts, but I love them anyway through the grace of God. I have the best takes, and I'm on the right side of history.
Wonderful. IRI.
What's up, everybody? I go by I'm Really Important. I talk politics on my channel. We focus on Capitol Hill, what's going on in the House, the Senate. We're watching all these 2020 races. I'm excited to be here with all of these Twitch politics rock stars. So thank you, Dylan, and let's have fun.
Wonderful. Destiny.
Hi, I'm I guess a left-leaning political person. I'd be classified as a sock dem. I talk politics and philosophy on my channel, and yeah.
You stop playing
Proudly
League?
supporting Biden coming. Whoa, let's not get too crazy. We still play League. Proudly supporting my man. I'm riding with Biden for these upcoming elections. Oh man.
Oh yeah.
The only one excited for Biden. Cool.
I'm so excited for Biden. Oh man.
This is the only partisan statement I'll make. You call yourself a utilitarian, yet you play League and actively damage the Twitch community through that playing of League. Next, I'll go to last username. You're the last one.
Hey, I'm last _username. The only ANCAP in Canada, approximately, and here to argue for libertarian side generally, and glad to be here.
Wonderful. Okay, let me go through the rules real quick. Everybody will get a 1 minute period of time where they can state basically their position on the topic. No one can interrupt them. If you interrupt them, you will get a mute and a warning. The same rule will be applied for a 1 minute period at the end of each topic. So you get a 1 minute outro where you can say your final thoughts on the topic. I don't care what they said. They could say that you believe X, Y, and Z, and you're like, I know I don't believe X, Y, and Z. You will have a time to respond to that and an allotted time frame to you. Between that, it's open debate. But if you interrupt people, I will use mutes heavily. I also have a co-moderator here, Mr. Geek. Would you like to speak up quickly?
Hey, what's up, everyone?
Yeah, he is. Even though he's French, he will not act cowardly today. He will mute you. Okay, so he will mute you if you talk over other people too much. If you just act outside the rules. No misgendering people. None of that's allowed here. None of that nonsense. And I just want to stay mostly on the topics. If you kind of go too far on topic, I'll do my best to drag you back, but you can try to bring the topic in whatever direction you want. Just if you get too far off course, I'll do everything to bring it back. I believe that's basically all of the rules. Yeah, so I think we can get started with the first topic. Did I miss anything, Mr. Gate?
No.
Okay.
That's pretty much it.
Wonderful. Okay, let's start with the first topic. The first topic is, what is your position on the Black Lives Matter protests that continue in cities across the country, and do you support their cause? I'll state it one more time. What is your position on the Black Lives Matter protests that continue in cities across the country, and do you support their cause? I'm going to start with the bottom left-hand corner with IRI.
Sure. So, yes, I support the cause. I've been to a few protests myself. It's 99% peaceful people out there just speaking up and disagreeing with how communities of color are policed right now. There are alternatives out there that they're bringing to light, and I'm listening, and I think a lot of America is listening right now, and I think this is the largest protest ever in American history, so that's amazing what they've done. And just, I think, 7 short years, wasn't it? 2013 when George Zimmerman was acquitted, and they started their movement. So I'm on board for it, and yeah, I mean, I understand there's some problems. People have some issues with some of the statements on their website, but it's really a decentralized organization with local chapters that are doing their own thing. So I'm excited to see what everybody else thinks about it, and that's my position.
Wonderful. Next is going to be Destiny.
I'm generally in support of large-scale protests that bring more awareness to how Blacks are treated in the United States, whether it's through the health system or through our criminal justice system. I don't necessarily stand for like the hashtag defund the police or hashtag abolish the police movement, but I think like the 8 Can't Wait or the campaign or Project Zero, a lot of the recommendations that those guys make towards reforming policing, I think are very important conversations to have, and I hope that the BLM movements continue to raise awareness around those types of conversations.
Wonderful. Next is going to be last username.
Right. So my problem with BLM is that they don't seem to have any sort of precise understanding of the problem that they're protesting against, or seem to be offering any solutions. If you go to their website and look at, what are we about, you have a bunch of really sort of vague general stuff that doesn't seem to solve anything. I think they're just causing a lot of distraction, and they're obviously getting a lot of support and getting everyone really excited and motivated, but they're not. But to what end? I don't see anything really coming out of it. I wish they would figure out exactly what they want or exactly what the problem is, exactly suggest some solutions and present those clearly, but they're not doing that.
Okay, next is going to be Suspect Sushi.
So the reason why I support the BLM movement is because the more riots and protests and looting and things like that nature keeps going on, the more and more it looks good for the right. I think it's better optics. So I encourage them to keep destroying communities and take down statues and firebomb buildings and things of that nature. I want them to keep doing that because it makes them look terrible. And do I support BLM? I support the idea that all Black lives matter, just like all white lives, all Asian lives, whatever matter. But the BLM as an organization, I don't agree with whatsoever.
Okay, next is going to be Bastiat.
Oh, well, quite a take. Wouldn't expect anything less. I support the Black Lives Matter movement because at the end of the day, to me, it comes down to 3 words: arbitrary state violence. 1,000 Americans are killed by police every year and have been for the last 10 years at least. There's a great website, mappingpoliceviolence.org, where you can see all kinds of good information about this in real time. They've tracked all the police killings over the last, at least since 2013, going back even further. And you can see that Americans are killed by their police officers at a rate of 4 times what, for example, a Canadian citizen faces. Furthermore, the data shows that blacks are killed more often than whites as a share of the population, even when you factor in the added number of police encounters Black Americans have versus white Americans. So Black Lives Matter is dealing with a real problem: arbitrary use of state violence against American citizens, not just Black, but all American citizens who are killed more than our fellow human beings in all of our other peer developed countries. So it's a real problem, and they're working to address it. And I think they're mostly peaceful protesters, and that's what we ought to be focusing on.
Wonderful. Next, I'm going to throw it over to the Doghouse Show.
Sure. So, generally speaking, I'm all for protesting. I'm not for rioting. I tried looking up the particular movement and what they stand for. I'll go into that a little bit later on. But what the things I've seen as far as what they stand for, I don't support. And in terms of the all the people that are killed by police, I'll just let this soak in that there's about 53 million police interactions that occur per year. So I'll let people just soak up on that little statistic. But generally speaking, protest good, riots bad. I've only been able to find like one, like a good solid demand. And with those, I don't actually support those particular demands.
Wonderful. Next is LTCRfan.
Okay, first of all, you have to define what you mean by Black Lives Matter, because this is purposefully Orwellian doublespeak, double meaning, because it can mean several different things. Number one, it could mean the completely unobjectionable meaning that Black Lives Matter, just like all lives matter. Number two, it could mean the neo-Marxist actual organization. Number three, it could mean there's systemic racism. There's other terms, there's other ways it could mean too. And so to just ask a question, oh, do you agree with Black Lives Matter, without actually specifying which of those many different meanings you're actually referring to, is purposefully designed to make it ambiguous. And so then you can criticize people when they talk about a different meaning, and you can say, oh, well, I meant this other meaning. It's a blatantly partisan political movement. If you go to Google Trends and actually search for the term, the last time interest in Black Lives Matter spiked was, guess what? Summer of 2016. Guess what was going on in summer of 2016? Presidential election. These people that are involved in it, how many of them voted in their local elections? How many of them know who their local judge are? How many of them know who their local prosecutor are? And how many of them know who their sheriff is and their local police chief and are actually involved in politics? I'm so sick of these people saying, we can't do anything else except violent rioting and burning down buildings and all this terrible stuff, when they've never done one thing to do a productive use of their political power in this country. And I'm sick of people who have not done one thing to play a productive role through our actual systems of policies, and then to come out and then say, oh, we have no other choice but to just do all this terrible, terrible stuff. And so, you know what? if you're really going to partake in this and they start being violent and rioting and tearing stuff down, even if you're a peaceful protester, you have a duty to stop and leave, because you being out there as a peaceful protester, you're providing cover for the criminals and you have a duty to get out of the way. You know what that's called? That's called being an accomplice to the crime, an accessory to crimes. And so anybody that says that they're peaceful, if you're out there and you see this stuff starting to go on that we've seen recently, you have a duty to stop and go home. Otherwise, you're providing cover for criminals.
Okay, you can take the question however you want. If you want to talk about specific organizations, that's fine. I didn't try to attempt doublespeak, but if you would talk about bigger problems, that's fine. We can bring it in any direction you want. Next, we're gonna go to Prime.
That was a hilarious little skit that we went through. Wow, didn't expect a rant, but maybe I should have. Never met LTCRfan before, but hello. So yes, I support BLM. I guess however you define it, don't care. I support defunding the police, and I support not only the singular issue of stopping police violence to people of color, but also the wider issue of having Black lives, the lives of Black people, be fully raised to the priority of other lives, that our humanity being fully recognized. So I support all of that. And just to LTCRfan, the people that have been out on the streets, and the people who support them from behind computer screen like me, have been involved in politics for quite a long time. And we've been doing exactly the things that you're saying. So I think that's a complete mischaracterization of the movement.
Okay, now, if you want to engage with anybody else, you are free to do that. I just want to put out one point. Do your best to be cordial. Do your best to not talk over other people. If you need to get a point in because they said something, that's completely allowed. If you have any questions about the rules or moderation, now is the time to ask them before we get into it.
Prime, you're a political streamer. You're the exception. 95 for
that. Well, wait.
LTCRfan.
I was asking for questions about moderation at the moment.
Oh, sorry.
No problem.
Is anybody going to mute Dylan for speaking over LTCRfan, or is this just total bullshit?
Yeah, this is total. This is a Burns dictatorship. Okay.
Did you speak, Doghouse?
Okay. So, Doghouse, you got a time to speak. Okay. So you can now. It's open. You can engage with somebody else who has difference of opinion. If you have a question about moderation at this point, you have to DM it to me. It is now open. If somebody sends something you disagree with, you can engage with them.
Jesus Christ, LTCRfan. Why would you start off by saying that you have to have an obligation to be involved in politics to not want to be killed by the police? All right.
Oh,
you should be able. No.
Oh,
you're saying that if you haven't voted or been productive in politics, then you have no room to talk about the issue. You want to be able to live a free life, unmolested, without violence in this country, without having had to engage in the electoral process. The state doesn't owe you. You don't owe the state your vote in order to be free of violence from the police.
No,
I kind of do though.
Well, I was addressing the very specific argument that a lot of people use to justify the violence and all of this civil unrest. Their specific argument is that we have to do this because we've tried to do it the right way and we can't do it the right way. So now we have to do all of this violence and crazy stuff. And it's obviously pretextual. So that's what I'm addressing. I'm not saying that you have to try to do it the right way before you can have a say. I'm saying you have to do it the right way before you can go and do civil unrest and try to justify it.
So this is a common theme. This is a very common theme, and that they'll say that there's these black on black crime in Chicago, right? Like, why don't you handle that first? First of all, the Black community has been doing that all throughout my life. You've heard Take Back the Night protests, right? There's been a specific movement to tackle these issues head on. But the people who are complaining about this, right, complaining that African Americans haven't done enough either on black on black crime or within the political context to tackle the police, they have not been standing with the African American community throughout all of this, right? They don't actually care. They're just simply using that as a rhetorical point. But no, we've been doing that the entire time. We've been tackling these issues head on through all avenues. It hasn't worked. So here we are.
Well, none of it's been effective, though. Like, it doesn't matter how many times you do the Take Back the Night shit if none of it's effective and people and homies are still shooting each other. Like, what do you mean? Like,
so you're saying it wasn't effective? Then I would agree with you. It wasn't. particularly effective.
Maybe they should change something fundamental, like maybe the culture that precedes these kind of actions.
Well, here's the point. These are local issues. Local policing are local issues, and so these people are out there protesting, saying vote Democrat, when all of the problems are in Democrat cities and Democrat states. And so the point is that quit criticizing the United States as a whole. We're one of the most just, most free, most fair countries in the history of the world. And if you want to fix your problems, go talk to your local prosecutor. Go talk to the local judge. Get involved with your local politics. Don't
Isn't
go
that part of the
blaming the
point?
United States as a whole.
Okay,
Isn't
Destiny.
that part of the point of these protests? Like, I feel like that's a big argument in favor of the protests. Is the point is to raise awareness to get people out to vote.
No, my point is if you actually think that there's problems in your community, you need to be paying to case by case what the prosecutor is charging, the sentences that judges are handing down. And if you have no idea who your local judge is or what types of sentence they hand down, you don't know who the prosecutor is and what types of cases they come by, you don't know who the police chief is and when he was hired and what types of reviews that local police chief has had, those are the types of issues you ought to be attacking, not coming and attacking Trump or the U.S. as a whole.
This
Well,
is
but
like
like
when
what you
those
just said, this is the whole
One
point.
at a time. One at a time.
That's a lot of anger already.
Let's start the Bastiat first.
Yeah, this is like when those communists say, hey, if you haven't read theory, my man, you got no room to talk on these issues. No, screw that. People are killed in the United States at rates that far exceed other developed countries. In Canada, for example, you are 4 times less likely to be killed by a police officer than you are in the United States.
But it's Canada, my
That
dude.
sounds really.
Yeah.
But it's
that
Canada,
sounds
my
very
dude.
scary.
And that has nothing to do with
sounds very
Canada.
scary.
Canada is a
Canada,
country.
dude.
Well, I have yet.
Because we say
Canada is
story.
a country.
Is
Bastiat.
gun ownership even
Bastiat, don't make. Okay, I had to mute him. But Doghouse is yet to talk around the issue, so I'm going to throw it to Doghouse. And Destiny had a point earlier, so I'm going to throw it back to Destiny.
Yeah. Bastiat, I would encourage you. You said that, I like how you're using 4 times to kind of draw up that particular emotion. And sure, at that number, just out of curiosity about how many people particularly die in the U.S. By the hands of police.
Yeah, 1,000 people are killed by police every year. That's 1/3 of a 9/11.
Oh, okay. I can also so
That's a
you're saying
disgusting
1,000 people.
know, right?
It is disgusting.
So
It is
1,000
disgusting
people-
that many thousands more Americans have been killed by police than by terrorists since 9/11.
Okay, so hold
Okay,
on.
How many of those are-
Dog.
So
Let's
you
go
have
to Dog.
1,000
Come
people.
on, we gotta let Doghouse finish his point.
So you have 1,000 people, 53 million police interactions per year. That gives you a 0.0019% chance of getting into a deadly police interaction in the United States. So as much as you want to draw out these scary numbers and try to scare people, just to keep in mind that it's a 0.0019% of all police interactions that end deadly or in a shooting.
I'll say this,
as
Dog.
long
Also,
as
what
we
about
try
the
to draw these
circumstances
emotions-
around those
Okay.
shootings, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, let's throw it over to Destiny. He had a point to make earlier.
Well, fuck, it's a little removed from this, but basically, like, my understanding is that the point of activism, the point of political activism, is to encourage people to go out and vote. So everything that you said earlier, LTCRfan, is 100% true. People should be worried about who their local, like, chief of police are, who the commissioner is, or who's being appointed as judges and everything. But I mean, that requires you to be involved in your local politics, which hopefully these types of protests are raising your awareness of.
Is BLM really getting that specific message out effectively, low, like saying
I
like,
don't think
vote
so.
and who to vote for and what policies to vote for?
Well, I guess we'll find out when
show.
these elections roll around, and we'll see who is voting where. I mean, like, the primary turnouts have been much higher, but if it only translates it to like the national level, then obviously, yeah, I would say that it's pretty failed then if you weren't able to get people involved or engaged at a local level. But I mean, it has to start with activism, right? Like, that's where it starts. Is
Can I put a point on lecture? You said I have a duty to go home if some rioting or violence starts. Are you kidding me? So my First Amendment right ends when somebody throws a water bottle cowardly from 100 feet behind the crowd? Really?
No, you still have the right to be out there and doing it peaceably yourself. My point is if you're a good citizen and there's criminals doing criminal activity around you and your presence there is making it harder for law enforcement to arrest those criminals, you are providing cover for criminals. And my recommendation would be if you're providing cover for criminals and criminal activity, you should go home and get out of the way so that the law enforcement can come in and arrest those people.
That's a real rich solution. You're saying basically that criminals have the right to shut down your First Amendment free expression.
No,
That's not what he's saying
right?
at all.
No, that's absolutely what you're saying. If you're saying
What
if you're a
he's
good
saying. Well, let's
citizen, if
listen
you're
up.
a good citizen, follow the criminal's lead and just get out of there. No, if you're a good
No,
citizen,
he's saying
exercise
make
your
way. He's
constitutional
saying
right.
get out of the way. Bare
Exercise
minimum.
your
get out of the way
let's
for
constitutional
the-
right.
let's
At your own
let
discretion.
Bastiat finish.
And by the way, if you want to talk about what good citizens, quote unquote, have been doing, a lot of these good citizens, these peaceful protesters, have actively been handing violent agitators to the police anyway.
Sushi, you wanted to respond?
Not in a majority, but that's not really. I just think that it's pretty interesting that like you're only really addressing like one part of what LCTR said. It's basically the same thing that IRI said, right? He said, go out and protest it, like try to push forth your political ideologies and things of that nature. I don't understand what's so wrong with someone saying be informed before you do that. Like when there's nothing worse than an uninformed voter. Like how does anyone disagree with this?
I don't. But the Doghouse Show. Hey, what's up, buddy? I thought your point though previously about like the stats of how often people die. I think that was complete nonsense. Like plane riots, right? We're riding a plane. That's the safest way to travel. But planes go down. Are we not supposed to be worried about plane crashes? Or are we supposed to?
That's not what I said, was it?
Let's let him finish his point.
If there's negligence during a plane crash, and there should be hearings, some people should be investigated, and people should be sent to jail. So, like, just because something is unlikely to happen doesn't mean that we can't be worried about it.
Okay,
overall.
let me ask you something. Why is it then that Bastiat decided he wanted to bring up 9/11? Why was it he mentioned 4 times more likely? Right? It's an Okay, well, it's an emotion. Sure, go ahead, Bastiat.
Yeah,
go ahead.
it is emotional because while it's easy for you to say, well, it's only so many points, so many whatever who die. Yeah, that's an easy way to brush off a lot of problems. But it's your entire existence if you're the one who had the knee put on the back of your neck and you're murdered in the street. So yeah, to try and minimize it statistically is ridiculous because it's a big damn deal for the people it happens to.
You try to make it sound like a common.
Let's clarify this because I'm really interested in this. Lecture fan, you earlier actually called it disgusting. You had an emotional reaction to when Bastiat said that and compared it to 9/11. Why is it disgusting, that comparison?
Okay, it's disgusting because Bastiat is using a statistic that doesn't even talk about whether those were justified shootings or anything else. And if a cop is out there and somebody pulls a gun on the cop and the cop shoots the guy, to compare that to 9/11 is disgusting because that was a terrorist attack, and it's just grotesque to make that comparison. There's nothing similar about it other than numbers, which is like it's almost as bad as comparing coronavirus deaths to 9/11 or something. It's like this was an intentional terrorist attack by radical Islamic extremists who are at war with the very idea of the United States and our freedoms. And to compare that to our hero law enforcement officers, literally, maybe some of them were completely justified. In fact, most of them were completely justified. Here's the thing. In the United States, if it's not justified, the cop gets arrested and charged, just like what happened with the cop who killed George Floyd. Hey, guys, you know this? The cop that killed George Floyd has been arrested and charged with murder.
Yeah, after a national movement had to form.
Right away.
Since 2013, here's some perspective for what you've just said, lecture fan. Since 2013, 7,663 Americans have been killed by police. Of those police involved, 95 were charged and 48 were convicted. That is to say, it's a drop in the bucket. It may as well be nothing.
Okay, here's the thing, though. If you're having police shootings in your community that are not being charged, that is a local prosecutor issue. You're not going to go protest Trump.
It's more than just a local prosecutor issue. First of all, the President of the United States has repeatedly encouraged police to strike hard, to quote-unquote dominate the streets. The federal government of the United States provides military-grade equipment to police departments free of charge or very cheaply. So this is absolutely a federal issue.
No. So notice the fear that is trying to
I want to hear from some other people. Doghouse, you wanted to say something?
Just noticing again here, we have a little bit of fear being driven. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to reassure people that, look, is it an issue? I wouldn't say it's a big issue. Definitely those 1,000 people's lives matter. And again, we can dive into those 1,000 numbers and look at what may have been justified, what may not have been justified. But it's very interesting to me how we've seen these numbers get blown up in such a way to drive fear into people, thinking that every time they go out, they're going to get shot or killed. When statistically speaking, it's very rare. I don't know many people that go into a airplane, like Prime was just saying, and get all, freaked out that the plane's going to go down because of the 0.00 whatever % chance the plane will go down. So by that same notion, we could look at many other issues that are 0.00. You have a chance of getting struck by lightning, but yet people still go out in the rainstorm. But the fear here is being driven off of a 0.0019% chance that you're going to die in a police interaction. Yet people are trying to drive home these numbers, drive home an emotion.
University of Michigan found that police violence is the 6th leading cause of death among black men in this country. So to just brush it aside, it's not nothing. All right.
And so it's beyond, I want to make it clear that it's beyond simply deaths. People get hung up on deaths. But to Doc Hollis's points, yes, I compare it especially to the number of police interactions. The number of deaths, I guess, is a tiny comparison, but it's also the way the nonviolent interactions go. The harassment, the abuse, the degradation, the humiliation of being stopped constantly, whether you're doing nothing, just walking down the street and being perceived as a criminal. It's the larger system. It's not simply a person in a grave.
First of all, for
Destiny, yeah.
For whatever our conversation is, for dogs numbers, this is a really weird way. I know we're trying to find like the most favorable way to present this data to make a political point, but if we say that 0.0019% of interactions are lethal, is that what your number was trying to prove?
I believe deadly. I believe 1,000 was the number that if I remember researching correctly, was
so
how many.
If that was true, if we have 100 interactions with a police officer in our entire life, which is probably fair between getting pulled over, maybe 100, maybe that might be a little high for some people. I don't know. We have 100 interactions our entire life. That means 1 out of every 1,000 people can plan on dying to the cops at some point in their life. That's a really bad number. Like, I know that we're trying to present it in a favorable light, but when you run a numbers game on that actually comes out to be like pretty surprisingly horrible. Also, the idea of comparing lightning strikes, where we don't consider lightning to be like a moral agent that can make choices and we can't exert influence over it, to the choice of a cop to execute a black man in the street. It's very strange to compare these two things. To assume that lightning is.
Let him finish. Let him. This is the last username. Please let him finish.
We generally don't compare amoral, non-agent things like lightning or tidal waves to choices made by moral things. We wouldn't say like, well, 1,000 people die by lightning. What's 100 people by cops? Well, the cops are making choices, and we can change that. We typically can't change the choice, that a path of lightning takes to the ground. It's just saying there's a strange comparison.
Can I say something real quick?
Okay, I'll go with the last username, then you suspect.
The point of the lightning comparison was not to point out that lightning is more evil than police. It's to point out that that you're more likely to be struck by lightning than killed by a police officer if you're unarmed. So we've been throwing around this number of like 1,000 people killed by police. The vast majority of those were armed suspects or otherwise dangerous. If you look at unarmed suspects, the number goes way, way down into like less than 20. So your chance, and so the point is to point out that you're more likely to get struck by lightning than you are to be killed by the police if you're, unjustly. Just to give you a sense of how rare this really is.
What does it mean to be armed? Does it mean you're just carrying a weapon? Does it mean
Bastiat, don't make me do it again. Suspect.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to.
So Bastiat, I actually have a quick question for you. This is a two-parter. One, this is just for you. You said that we didn't arrest Derek Chauvin quickly enough. Is 4 days too slow for you? Like that was during like the entire process, because like George Floyd died on May 25th and he was arrested on May 29th. So tell me where the slowness was. That's a pretty quick.
My point wasn't on speed. My point was on the fact that
no. You literally said it wasn't fast enough.
It was on scale. It was on the scale. I said it took a national event to lead to his arrest.
It was 4 days, dude.
Was that before?
And it turned out that blew up real quick.
Was that before or after we burned down a police precinct?
Yeah, it is possible. It is. Yeah, in fact, I think it was after that. It is possible that
that's
it
what
happened. After all, 48 people were 98 of the 7,000 and change that I mentioned earlier were arrested.
The protest wouldn't have changed anything. The other guy was getting arrested no matter what. Are you kidding me?
No,
nobody has been arrested that
because at the end of the day, there's a big reason why the police typically aren't arrested, and even when they are, typically aren't charged, because prosecutors depend on police for convictions, and police are protected by
I would say it's more police
unions that keep them from being charged, give them good deals when they are, ensure that they're employed after a couple of ensure they have long-term employment, and ensure that their that their records are wiped every 5 years.
Hey, I don't like one at a time. One at a time. I'll do it.
I got a two-parter.
Okay.
Go on. I'll let suspect.
Okay, suspect.
So
use the time.
So it's interesting that you use certain emotive words. Like you said, executed in the streets. When like in 2019, like white people per capita were killed more than black people per capita when it came to unarmed shootings, and that doesn't include whether the officer was fearing for his life, whether they were antagonistic in nature, whether they had drugs in the system and they were tased before. There's so much nuance that goes past this point that no one really wants to talk about. They're like, blacks are being slain in the streets. It's an epidemic. It's hunting season, but it's really not. Like I don't understand this narrative.
Yeah, I use the word
Yeah,
execution. I use the word execution because a police officer put his knee on a man's neck until he died. That police officer,
everybody's
for no reason,
suspect. Let him
hands,
respond.
That police officer represents the state and therefore executed the man.
Who the fuck was like, yeah, I'm with Derek Chauvin. Who's out here being like, yeah, dude, I'm sure even David Duke was like, I may not like black people, but he definitely got murdered on TV.
Yeah, I don't know.
What do you mean?
Not true. No.
But
I'm memeing.
Destiny, I want to throw this. I want to throw this. Okay, I want to throw that. I'll mute again. Destiny, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, just so real quick, in terms of people saying like, well, who justified that? I remember Candace Owens going on a long thing about, oh, well, he had drugs in his system, blah, blah, blah. I think once that toxicology report came out, I think a lot of large figures came out and kind of sort of justified the police behavior there.
Do you remember her
said
that he shouldn't have died, but
Prime, I got it. I'll let you respond right after. Prime has been wanting to go for a while, so I got to throw it to Prime.
Okay, yeah. So this point about the number of white people who died. So even if your stats are completely correct, what difference would that make? I mean, I also do believe that white lives also matter, right?
I prefer.
The point is that we want no one to be shot unnecessarily by police, right? Like, that's the ultimate goal, is to get it down to zero, right? The tactics that the police have been using against the black community for so very long, right? That's been expanded to the larger white community, and that's why people are being shocked at what they're seeing on TV, right? So to say that, oh, more white people being shot, well, that's a problem. Let's do something about that too, right? As this movement goes along, we'll be bringing them with us, right? But the focus just happens to be on Black Americans right now. But that doesn't mean that like we don't care about the lives of oftentimes working class white Americans.
White Americans are likelier to be killed by the police than white Canadians.
Gotta throw it to
Mapping Police Violence Project.
Lecture fan was waiting.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Here's the thing. This is an issue that when it comes to normal average Americans, Democrats and Republicans, everybody agrees police brutality is bad. Unjustified police violence is bad. If a police officer kills somebody, they should be arrested. The thing is that this is not a divisive issue, but it has become super divisive because the left has made it extremely divisive and turned it into this partisan political issue and doing really gross attacks on heroes in law enforcement who have a very difficult job of trying to protect people and are being tossed. The Harvard economist Ronald Fryer has done studies that show there is no systemic police racism in the United States. This is something we should all agree on. Destiny totally misconstrued what Candace Owens was saying. Candace Owens' only point was that we should not make a martyr out of George Floyd, and pointed out a couple of bad things because the left, in their attempt to make this a super divisive partisan political issue, was acting as, was trying to make him into this wonderful martyr who we should honor and stuff. And that was Candace's only point. Nobody, including Candace Owens, ever said the guy should not have been arrested. Here's the thing is everybody agreed he should be arrested. He did get arrested. If anything, we should be thanking America's law enforcement being so just and congratulating America for creating a system of justice where our police officers are actually held accountable. And if any of you guys had genuine concerns about these issues, you would be focused on trying to make other countries more like the United States.
Okay.
Lecture fan,
Specifically, real quick, can I respond to that?
Yeah, you can respond to that. Easy. Yeah.
Yeah. So real quick, so the idea that he shouldn't be made a martyr because he had some scant traces of drugs in his system is just laughably hilarious. The idea that doing drugs somehow makes you worthy of being assassinated by the police, like, we don't need to character assassinate a guy that has already been like police assassinated. I think that's a little bit maybe not deserved. Also, the idea that we should be congratulating our police force for holding themselves accountable for executing a guy in the street, probably not the look I'd want to go with there, Chief, but that's just my view.
Okay, once again, it's missing nuance. Like, Candace Owens prefaced the message saying that he was slain and he should not have been slain, and like Derek Chauvin needs to be prosecuted. However, people are making him out to be a saint. And then she had a huge disagreement with that. He like robbed a pregnant woman and held a gun to her stomach. Like, I'm just saying he wasn't a saint, but also he should not have been killed.
Bastiat, you want to go for a while?
Yeah. Look, LTCRfan, we're talking about other countries. And the fact is that in countries like, say, Canada, which got their independence from the British Empire by repeatedly asking nicely until it finally took in 1982, they nevertheless have managed to get lower rates of police violence. Meanwhile, our country, founded in liberty, has more killings by police than any other developed country per capita and on an absolute number. So yeah, we're talking about trying to make this country a little more like those countries in the sense of less Americans being killed by the state.
Okay.
Doghouse owns
So
an
here
IRI.
we've got two lawyers here. And I would imagine that when y'all go to court, I imagine that you would need evidence, correct? Like, because I think we keep missing this bigger point here, that you need evidence to support a crime. No? Like, I don't think you want to go to prison for, say, I don't know, first-degree murder for punching a guy, right? So let me explain here what I'm talking about. I hear a lot of things like, why aren't the police being charged? Why aren't they doing this? Do y'all believe in evidence? Are you saying that, okay, cop shot X guy, he needs to go to jail? Is it that simple?
No,
are we looking at that like simple to take?
It's simpler than that, and it's worse than that. The fact is that for a police officer, or sorry, for a prosecutor to advance in their career, they need to get convictions. In order to get convictions, they need assistance from the police, and they're not going to get that assistance from the police if they prosecute the police and send the police to prison.
What was George Floyd charged with, and why do you believe he should be charged with that particular crime? Let's see if you understood. Because
you mean the person who killed him?
Okay, what did he get charged with? What did
what exactly are you trying to get? What exactly is you trying?
What I'm getting at is that you keep trying to simplify a more complicated issue than simply saying what you want is you want more cops charged, but yet you're unwilling to look at the evidence as to why they should be charged.
No, I'm saying there's a systemic problem that ensures that whatever the evidence is, it doesn't matter.
So you're saying evidence doesn't matter. We got a lawyer saying evidence doesn't matter.
I'm saying that in our system where prosecutors have wide discretion, the evidence doesn't matter. If they don't want to charge, they're not going to charge unless extreme political pressure is brought upon them to do it, as in this case.
I gotta. There's been people waiting for a while now. I gotta give the prime IRI, and LTCRfan will throw it straight to you. I promise.
Okay. LTCRfan brings up that Roland Fryer study, but I imagine he hasn't actually read it because in the conclusion it says, even when officers report civilians have been compliant and no arrest was made, blacks are 21.2% more likely to endure some form of force and interaction. Yet, on the most extreme use of force, officers involved shootings, we are unable to detect any racial differences in either the raw data or when accounting for controls. So even according to your own study, there is racial bias. Furthermore, that study, in any case, has been refuted and debunked by also from people from Harvard. If you care about that stuff, it doesn't really matter. But yes, that study has been debunked. But the evidence you're bringing, oftentimes you see this, that conservatives will just take the headline and then not even read the rest of the study. So that point is wrong. And also, once again, and we at this point just keeps getting lost. It's not just police deaths, right? It's police violence, violent interactions. Those things matter as well.
Okay, I'll let that was directly to LTCRfan, so you can go, man.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of other studies that can be referenced. There was a Wall Street Journal. There was a Wall Street Journal editorial called "The Myth of Systemic Police Racism." It's a Wall Street Journal editorial. It's got 3 or 4 different studies, including the Ronald Fryer one. And I'm aware that the Ronald Fryer did find some bias in non-shooting situations, but the point that I raised was with respect to shootings, there was no racial bias, and then there was several other ones. But Bastiat keeps making my point that these are local political issues. He keeps saying, oh, this is an issue of the prosecutor, and the prosecutor doesn't want to charge the police because they have to work with the police and they have to get prosecutions to advance in their career, which is all true, which is all just goes to show that people need to be involved in their local politics, and for people to not have a damn clue who their prosecutor is and what they're doing, and nobody knows who their local judge is or what sentence they're handing down, and nobody knows who prosecutors are oftentimes elected or appointed, And that's where people ought to be focusing. This is now a national political issue on something that most Americans, everybody agrees. Nobody likes police brutality. We all agree. This is all agree. But you guys have turned it into this national, partisan, divisive, this grotesque issue where you're attacking some of the most honorable people in our society, in our country, when really what you ought to do is maybe just pay a little bit more attention to who the hell your prosecutor is and what they're doing. And if people actually cared about their prosecutors and cared about these issues, then maybe the prosecutors would be more concerned about those voters as opposed to, just trying to rack up prosecutions to run in a statistic in their next political race.
And let's
So I'll
also
say this,
just forget
IRI has been waiting for so long. I gotta throw it to IRI. It was, you were trying to respond to Suspect Sushi's point earlier, and if you still care to do it, I'm giving you the chance right now.
Well, while I appreciate my friends on the right experiencing these protests from their comfort of their couch on Fox News and viral Twitter clips, as someone who's actually been to the protests, 99% of them are peaceful. There's a lot of speeches. There's a lot of organizing. So I think it was Sushi that said earlier, why are people going out there uneducated? You go to a protest to find out who the local organizations are, and you meet people. You meet those groups. You add people on Facebook, and you join groups, and then you come out for stuff next time. I've seen it personally, and it happens all the time. You don't just go out there to start shit. Most people go out there to peacefully protest.
So yeah, you're right. Like the Movement for Black Lives, who drew up the Breathe Act, who on their website actually says, we believe that prisons, police, and all other institutions that inflict violence on Black people must be abolished and replaced by institutions that value and affirm the flourishing of Black lives. And by the way, 2 representatives support the Breathe Act, which talk about ending life sentences and I guess also abolishing mandatory minimum sentencing laws. So that'll be pretty interesting to see. Also developing a time-bound plan to close all federal prisons and immigration detention centers. So these are the people that are out there protesting in these movements. So those are just a few things I had found as well.
So funny.
Okay. I gotta
give it to
Bastiat.
Yeah, gotta throw it to Bastiat.
All right. First of all, nobody said there's no local side to this. Of course, there's a local side to it. You're absolutely right that people should focus, in some part at least, on the local side of it. But you're absolutely wrong when you say that there's no national side to it. Not only does the federal government bring civil rights suits and investigate local police departments for violations of civil rights guaranteed at the federal level, but the federal doctrine introduced by the United States Supreme Court, which of course, as we know, no local government can override, of qualified immunity, ensures that police cannot be held they really cannot be held account with respect to civil litigation. So you can't sue them unless they meet some very, very high standards that ensure that in practice, the same way it's very difficult to prosecute police officers in court, it's very difficult to sue them in the civil courts as well. So that's a federal issue that requires direct federal involvement, federal law from Congress to overturn qualified immunity. Otherwise, there's no way to do that at all.
Can you sue the city, and can't you sue the police department and stuff like that? Can't you, I believe there's been some civil suits that have been brought up against these particular departments, no?
Yes.
And wouldn't it make more sense to sue somebody that has a bigger pocketbook as well that you may get more money for? Matter of fact, it even takes that further.
It's all government officials.
Because matter of fact, if we could take Botham Jean, for example.
Performing discretionary functions, it gives them immunity from civil suits unless the plaintiff shows the official violated clearly established statutory or constitutional rights of which a reasonable person would have known. And in practice, what that has meant is that if the egregious incident that the person is suing over hasn't happened before, that is to say, no reasonable person would know that it was egregious, no suit will be heard on it.
Well, the funny thing is you're sitting here acting as if that's the main purpose of this movement, and it's not. It's defunding the police. It's like, oh yeah, you're gonna get a lot of agreement when you come out and talk about qualified immunity. But when you're talking about abolishing the police, which is quite funny coming from the left, because they really want the police there to give you $1,000 fine for not wearing a mask. But boy, otherwise you gotta abolish the police.
I wish that all the conservatives that were somebody earlier mentioned things like, oh, well, how many guns are down here compared to Canada? Or maybe Black people should change the culture, whatever. It's funny because
both of those are wrong.
Yeah, sure. Okay, cool. So well, let's change the culture then. So we talk about guns down here. Does that mean that we need to be a little bit more restrictive on our gun rights? Or does it mean we need to take mental health a little bit more seriously and extend some sort of universal health care to people that can't pay for it? Does it mean we need to change the way that we prosecute and funnel money to drug organizations by getting rid of the war on drugs? These are 3 things that could very easily curb gun violence, but conservatives seem opposed to all of those as well. What are conservatives actually proposing to do with gun violence besides just telling people to act right?
Actually, the less government intervention, the better. I don't actually approve of the drug war in any capacity. I think it's just been a sinkhole, and all it's done is just incarcerate people over bullshit charges. So you're not really going to find me to be against you in that regard. But I'm pro-gun as fuck, so you're not going to get me to acquiesce on that one.
So then why would you talk about these people being armed as if they're doing something
because
wrong?
you fucking quoted about like gun crime in Canada in comparison to gun crime in America when like the gun culture is vastly different in Canada. And not so long ago, didn't someone just dress up like a Mountie and fucking go on a rampage killing a bunch of people because no one was armed?
No, the fact that we in America have the freedom to own guns doesn't mean that therefore we deserve to be killed more often for our Second Amendment rights.
That's not even remotely close.
That's the implication of what you're saying. Absolutely, you're saying we've got a different gun culture, and therefore we should just accept those deaths. No, we can certainly do better without giving up our rights.
When you take the amount of guns owned in America in relation to actual violent crime caused by guns, most of them are done by illegal gun ownership and criminals, just baseline criminals who smuggle guns in the first place. Most lawful citizens are not the ones who are doing these kind of like gun crimes. So like, why is it an issue if we own?
Yeah, so let's end those illegal gun purchases by expanding background checks and red flag laws.
No, I think we should strengthen our borders even more so we don't have gun runners coming into our country.
No. Hey, next person talk. Mute him.
We're all witnesses.
Lecture fan, please. Don't make my job any harder than it is. Okay, if you want to talk, if you want to respond to what you just heard, just raise your hand. I'll do it like it's kindergarten.
Oh, okay.
Okay, just Prime? Oh, well, everybody. Okay, Prime, yeah, sure.
I was really surprised by that. The U.S. is the biggest arms dealer in the world, right? Like, we know this, right? The guns are coming from here, inside the house, right? Why would we need Mexican, the guns to be exported and then re-imported? Are these drugs here? Going to Canada and coming back cheaper somehow? Like, no, there's no point in that. So I don't. Explain that to me, Sexpert Sushi, and also if you can explain to me this culture nonsense that you keep talking about. What is it within the black culture, right? The apparently singular black culture is the problem. Lay that out for us.
Do you really want to go down this line? Because we already talked about this before when we did our own thing?
We talked about a lot of things. I
would love to hear what's toxic about black culture. Yeah.
What I think about talks about the black culture, at least in the inner city in Southeast DC during the murder height of the 90s where I grew up, like there is a huge disincentivization when it came to educations. For instance, like kids used to get beat up if you got good grades in class, like you were considered acting white if you were doing so. Also, like the music is inherently toxic in nature, which devalues our women. It devalues like any type of like civil obedience to law and order. Like these things like permeate throughout our culture, and it makes it toxic in nature. Like you can laugh all you want, but like when you talk about bitches and hoes killing people on the streets because of drug deals and their music, and that gets ingrained in children, like that's an issue.
And it's the comic books, and it's the death music, and it's the what else was it? The video games, right? It's all those. Someone protect the children.
Some things are considerably more tangible than that.
Touch your pros even harder, please.
Okay. Destiny, you wanted to respond to that?
Yeah, this is like a common argument. I hear this so many times. So the next question is, where does this culture come from? Why did blacks make this culture, not whites?
Well, I mean, actually, I think it all started around after 68. Yeah. So like, I think the welfare state also absolutely destroyed the black community when it incentivized women to be more married to the government than have a father in the home. The lack of a father means yes, I absolutely do. I absolutely
do. You think that people make decisions like this?
I think the lack of fathers in the home make people... children, any race of children, without a complete core set of values, like man, woman, woman, I don't care, but two parents in the home, you are more successful as a child. You are less likely to commit crime. You are less likely to be addicted to drugs. You're more likely to go to a college or a trade school. These things are statistical facts.
That if we two questions. One, you think if we polled single moms, you think they'd say like, yeah, I actually like the life I'm living now because of the welfare state, because of the meager amount I get paid via welfare? And two, why didn't all white people start doing this?
I mean, white people are very rampantly on the welfare state. What do you mean?
Not in the same. Are you telling me that the single parent household? I don't know if you're being
Okay, well,
honest
single
right now.
parentage.
No, hold on, wait. You just said
Let
heavily
Destiny.
weighted
Suspect.
percent? Yeah, hold on,
Let him
Yeah,
finish.
that was the really stupid fucking pivot. So my question was,
No.
why aren't white people impacted the same level of black people? You just quoted me these problems
Poor
related
white
to
community.
single
Poor
parent
white communities
households.
are
Wait, hold on, wait.
Eat
Let
it
me
up. Don't
finish.
worry.
Okay, I'm trying to point out why I think you're being very dishonest. You and I both know that single parent household probably uniquely affects the black community. So when I ask you why aren't white people taking advantage of the welfare state like black people are, I'm very clearly asking you why they aren't doing it in the same per capita percentage, okay, as black people. For you to just say, well, lots of white people do it is a really dumb hand wave. So I'm going to ask you one more time, why don't white people take advantage of the welfare state the same way that black people do?
Dude, poor whites and poor blacks perform along the same lines that also have the same issues that the welfare state has caused that just heavily ravaged the black community in comparison to the white community. But when the welfare state was implemented, single parentage also increased in the white community. What do you mean? Like it went from like 24% to like 78% or something ridiculous like that in the black community. And for white community, it went like from like I forget the exact numbers in the white community. I think it was like 48-ish% or something like that from a really low number. I'll try and like look that up in a second. But what I'm saying is like poor communities with single fatherhood that's like that their entire livelihood is contingent on food stamps and welfare tend to have children that are more likely to be drug addicted, crime, less likely to achieve things of that nature. So complete family households seem to be the best indicator for success in America.
Sure, but why is it that white people aren't seeing this at similar numbers as black people and creating a similarly toxic culture? Because clearly, we called out specifically black culture.
Don't you think black culture is probably the most unique culture in the world and the most copied culture in the world, right? Whites widely listen to like black music and things of that nature, but white music is not nearly as influential in the microcosm of their communities as black culture is.
Sure. Why? Where did black music come from? Where did this black culture come from?
Well, it came from the roots of America. Like, what do you mean? It came from just the roots of like how they even started as a people. What do you mean?
Yeah. Okay. What you just said is every single thing every liberal or left-leaning bleeding heart guy says ever. Black people have a very unique history in the United States, and a lot of the quote-unquote toxic culture that we talk about has roots in some of the racist laws that were on the books and off the books in the United States. So
tell me what Jim Crow law mandated that you call women bitches and hoes.
Okay, wait. Let's let Destiny finish.
Yeah, I mean, like we can talk about Jim Crow laws all day. I mean, Jim Crow laws that relegated black people out of living in decent communities that led to an increase in single-parent households that maybe led to people having less respect for their mothers because they were working all the time might lead to kids calling women hoes. I don't know. That could be a thing that happens. I'm sure you can probably think of a million stories where something like that has happened, from shit that we see in the media to shit we see on TV to shit we see in the streets. Like all of this is possible, right? That's just one of a million different stories. But like the problem is that these things are rooted in racist policies. So to try and address it as only a socioeconomic problem or say, I don't know why blacks have all these problems when you just told me that, well, black people have a unique position in the United States and it's probably where a lot of this stuff comes from, just strikes me as kind of odd.
An old Brookings Institute study shows from 1996 demonstrates that the cause of out-of-wedlock births is less likely to be welfare and more having to do with the end of shotgun weddings and the rise of the sexual revolution. So
you're talking about a movement that incentivized single parentage in their actual like sexual revolution, and on top of that, like actually making someone adhere to responsibility rather than just fucking dying and dashing a chick and then getting her pregnant and rolling out. Are you kidding me? So there is more marriage and people actually being pushed into responsibility for a child that they helped create. What? Like, dude, there's a direct correlation between before the welfare state and after the welfare state when it came to single parentage. You can give me whatever bias like source that you have to say, oh, it's definitely not because of the welfare state, because they're usually the biggest proponents of it, but that's not the case.
What exactly does this have to do?
They went door to door.
The issue of police killing all Americans.
People ask me a question.
Black Americans.
People ask me a question to delve deeper into it.
I'll tell you what it is.
Okay, LTCRfan, I haven't heard you in a while.
Okay,
ahead,
this is what we just witnessed here is a classic Saul Alinsky tactic used by leftists. Bastiat did it, and Destiny did it. What they did is what we're talking about here is the Black Lives Matter movement, which is a neo-Marxist abolishing the police movement, incredibly unpopular, very unpopular thing. Bastiat brings up qualified immunity and is making these nuanced arguments about qualified immunity. Destiny brings up the drug war. These are both issues that have broad support and have nothing to do with the current movement and the violent protests going on. And so what they're doing is they're using this tactic to say, well, don't you think that we should reform qualified immunity? And don't you think we should reform the drug war? When, hello, we're not talking about that. We're talking about a neo-Marxist violent movement to abolish the police. And so then when you say, oh yeah, no, I disagree with a neo-Marxist abolishing the police movement, then they say, oh well, I can't believe you support the drug war, and I can't believe you support qualified immunity. It's complete BS. And no, we're not talking about it. The reason we got here is because it's a leftist tactic to try to put
mainstream liberal politicians aren't even in favor of abolishing the police. Biden's not in favor of it. Black leader Clyburn's not in favor.
The entirety of
Let him
America.
finish. No, lecture. Let him finish.
This is just so funny to me.
Let him finish.
Not only is Biden explicitly not in favor of it, when Trump made the exact same claim you're making now in front of Wallace and tried to find it, he was humiliated on national TV because he couldn't produce that claim. You have to retract that. Biden very clearly is not in favor. Really, where has he said it then? Can you please demonstrate that for us?
I can absolutely find you the clip. It's on the GOP War Room YouTube channel. Joe Biden was asked a question on one of his live stream things within the last couple of weeks, and he was specifically asked, do you agree with transferring funding from police to other community organizations? And he said absolutely yes, and I can absolutely produce that clip.
Abolishing the police?
That's not abolishing the police.
Oh, let's see. Defunding the police, taking the police funding and sending it somewhere else.
Some funds.
Can I ask you?
Okay. This is getting out. Bastiat, muted. Okay. I was very okay. We're gonna do this. Okay. Welcome everyone to my classroom. Let's all be well behaved. I don't want to give anyone detention. Okay. Destiny has asked LTCRfan, and let me just 100% understand what's going on. You have asked him to produce a clip of Joe Biden advocating for the abolishment of the police force in the United States of America, correct?
Yes, and he's talking about transferring funding now.
Okay, so LTCRfan, what's your response to that?
My response to that is that I guess you're right. He hasn't called for the complete abolition of, but he has said that he wants to transfer funding, which is a flag or a flag or a dog whistle to the left that is politically defensible. And so now you're going to make some cute distinction between transferring all the police funding to some other organization and some other thing and total abolition of the police. And it's like, you know what? Maybe there's a tiny distinction, but it's not an important one. And Joe Biden has totally given over to the left, and transferring funding from the police is just one step down the road towards total abolition.
I just ask one question for LTCRfan. Let's say, for instance, that sometimes we call 911 if there's like an animal that's running around in the street. If we were to instead like increase the ability of like animal control to send specialized people to deal with that, and like we transferred a little bit of police funding to that in order to handle those situations more specially, would you be opposed to that?
They're already covered.
No, let him answer.
I do want to hear from LTCRfan.
Okay. Well, it's a local issue. If it was in my, I wouldn't. And what? So, Destiny, are you saying that you actually are in favor of defunding the police? Are you seriously defunding the police in favor of that?
If it means transferring funding to agencies that can more appropriately deal with certain problems, yeah, it's really stupid
Okay.
that we call police when there's like fucking animals in the street.
All right, as somebody who's worked in that sector, do you mind if I say something?
Okay. We had a beautiful. Okay, LTCRfan, you got one more, then we're throwing it over suspect sushi.
Destiny started out by saying, "Oh, no mainstream politician actually supports this and then now he's saying, "Yep, I actually do agree with defunding the police." So we got him there.
Defunding the police, then sure.
A suspect.
Okay, so you're using the analogy of like the animal control. Actually, animal control is funded directly alongside the police. I'm actually a 911 dispatcher, and I work in tandem with police, EMS, and fire pretty consistently. So they are considered an officer. They just only interact with animals. So they get funded at the same time. So if you are reallocating funds away from the police, you'd be reallocating funds away from animal control as well.
I mean,
I'm just saying, like, let's just put forth things that you actually know something about.
Fine. You could change it to be any number of hypotheticals. If you want to shift money from the police to mental health care practitioners who might be able to handle people in emergency, in certain maybe suicidal situations better than the police could. It's the same principle. The idea is to take certain public health functions or public safety functions that maybe don't directly go to the idea of a police force, but might better be handled by some kind of social worker and shift the funding to them. It might also just mean reducing the money that police spend on Pentagon-grade military equipment. It could
We
be
should
that.
increase funding. We should increase funding.
No, about the reallocation of funds to different sectors like social work and things of that nature. You understand that no matter what, officers would have to respond on scene. That's like, for instance, not just, I'm not even going to use my own anecdotal, like multi-year, like professionalism. Like, how about we just take the video of like when they were in Chaz, where the ambulance was staying outside of Chaz while a person was dying because they're mandated to wait until officers can escort them in for the EMS, for the paramedic safety. There's things like this that it's called scene safety. So officers will always need to necessarily be there. So like, you want social workers to be there, but they're still going to need an officer contingent. So why don't you just say add more funding to the police so we can have these alongside the officers?
How many police killings could be prevented by funding mental health interventions, or what was the other one? Less military grade, equipment for the police. How many of these police killings could be prevented by either of those measures?
Okay, I before anybody answers, Prime has had his hand up for a hell of a long time, and I really appreciate you following the rules. What do you want to say?
Following the rules. Yeah. So what I really love about these current protests, these George Floyd BLM protests, whatever you want to call them, is that it's doing more than simply calling for defunding the police. It's calling in to question the legitimacy of the police. U.S. law enforcement is facing the biggest crisis ever faced in the history of our nation right now, right? And this is why these cops are acting out, because their violent, thuggish behavior is finally being called into question. I'm not an anarchist, but I do like the point of justifying hierarchies, right? So why should we be listening to these people? If they can't use their power responsibly, as we've seen during these protests, when the police have unleashed a terrible amount of violence against peaceful protesters. If they can't do that properly, then maybe we should be questioning their role in our society. And that's what gets under the skin. I love every fucking minute of it.
So wait.
Okay, Doghouse. Yeah, you've been on my list. You can go.
So there's so much to unpack here. First and foremost, the defunding thing I think is very situational, because I think there are certain circumstances where you would be able to actually allocate funds and have that little, like, that extra room to move it around. I think it just really depends on the jurisdiction. To hit on what Prime said, I think that Prime. I'm so sorry, Prime. I'm willing to concede that there are peaceful protesters. I don't know if I'm willing to concede that they aren't doing anything and these cops are just coming in and just straight up like tear gassing this with no provocation at all. I don't know if I can buy into that.
Yeah, that hasn't happened.
I feel I feel like the video has been clear. I mean, like I can't, if the videos, all the videos have come out, the hundreds of hours of footage has come out, has not convinced you, then there's nothing I can do to convince you. So I just
let me ask you this. And I'm not trying to ask this as a gotcha, because I understand that maybe you watch some videos that maybe I haven't seen, and I'm willing to concede that. Sure. Do you think that there are people that are in fact throwing bottles and lasers and fireworks at the cops? Do you think that? I mean,
when people are throwing, yeah, I'm sure. I'm absolutely sure.
So do you consider those people? I'm not saying the people that are protesting in the back, because I think I'm willing to concede this point. Okay. Do you think the people that are up front that are throwing these things are not peaceful? I'm willing to concede to the point that there are peaceful protesters, maybe in the back.
Sure.
Are you willing to concede that those people that are in the front that are throwing these bottles aren't peaceful?
If they attacked first, then sure. But if not, if they're responding to police violence, then I would say they're defending themselves.
I don't know about you, but I'm a big fan of MLK when he's talking about nonviolence. That's just me.
I got it. Okay, we got to. Okay, Bastiat, I'll let you finish this off, and then we got to wrap it up with finishing statements.
6%, according to Pew Research, 6% of the United States adult population, that's say 12.5 million people, involved themselves in one form or another of Black Lives Matter protests. That is to say, physical activism. So to say that these peaceful folks are just in the back, or there's some kind of minority, or that there's any appreciable number of Marxists compared to ordinary Americans out there exercising their First Amendment rights is nonsensical.
But the damage they do is pretty large, man.
And okay. I said I said that was it. So everybody's got closing statements. I saw last username raise his hand first, so he's going to be the first person on the bottom right. I'm going to throw this to. And again, I just want to say this one more time, and this time I'm going to be a lot more forceful. You'll get an immediate mute. Mutin's not here. Immediate mute if you interrupt somebody. So please, for the 1 minute, I don't care what they say, you got to be quiet. I promise you get a time to talk. Throw it over to last username.
Okay, so I think the big problem here is that I'm just not convinced that the particular problem of police killing people unjustly is as obviously it's a problem. The police kill a single person unjustly. That is an outrage, and it's something we should not put up with. I'm not convinced that it is a problem that justifies the massive public response that we're having, weeks and weeks of protest. This is something that happens to, I believe last year, something like 9 to 15 unarmed Black men were killed by police in a country of 330 million people. And that's gone down quite a bit from, it's been going down. That's been the trend. And it's great that it's going down. It's bad that there's still 9 to 15 people, but it's never going to be zero. As you get down like lower and lower, it's going to be harder and harder to make progress. There's always going to be a few incidents. That said, since Prime brought up anarchy, I am an anarchist, and I have been talking about solutions to the police, the problem of police. I don't believe that the police are morally legitimate. I do want to defund them. And I've been proposing very detailed and consistent means of doing that for a long time now, since before it was cool. Just wanted to throw that out there. So, yeah, I'm done.
Okay, next I'm going to throw the suspect sushi, and right after is going to be Doghouse. I got to go use the bathroom, so please, everyone, behave. Mr. Geek's still in chat, and he can mute you.
I'm about to TOS so hard.
Don't. I still got a Frenchman in here. Okay, suspect.
Nah, you're good. Honestly, I don't know. I said what I wanted to say. If anyone ever really wants to talk about more of the cultural issues, you can holler at me. I'm not afraid to talk about this to anyone. But yeah, so BLM protests, keep going. It looks horrible. The more you allow for people to do this and you don't actively help capture these in my opinion, American separatists who are fucking firebombing and like making IEDs, nail bombs, that has happened, and injuring officers, the worse you look, and it helps us on the right. So I appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay.
All right.
Who's next?
So, it'd be me.
Okay.
In conclusion, I just wanted to say that, again, for protests against riots, acknowledging that there are separates between those two. However, I think there are particular parts of the movement that are for abolishing the police based on the actual movement B4ML. They are a part of Black Lives Matter. Don't want to say that they're combined. I haven't done enough research to make that conclusion. I tried looking up Black Lives Matter, had a very difficult time finding the actual demands, a centralized demand of what they wanted, other than policing. The other thing I have is I think that from what all this conversation is, I wish we would have a little bit more of a nuanced take into before we call for justice. I think when you want justice, you have to understand that there is a justice system. And I think there's important to understand that when you put someone in front of a jury, that you have to convince the jury that this particular crime was committed. And in order to make that particular case, you need facts, you need evidence, you need these things. So I think it's very important when people sit there and protest and saying, we want more police arrested. What I would ask, one, what do you want them arrested for? And two, what is the evidence to back up the particular crime that you want them arrested for? I think these two are very important because otherwise that is how you get cops that get off because they want to appease the public. And when they try to appease the public, guess what? They don't have enough evidence. It gets put in front of a jury and it goes bye-bye. And then they get upset. So I wish more people had a little bit more of a nuanced take than a simplistic take of saying cops shoot person, bad, arrest for murder. That's too simplistic. And that's not how it works in a criminal justice system. And it's surprising to me that we had a lawyer on here saying that evidence doesn't matter. But anyways.
Okay, next I'm going to throw it over to... I'm back. I'm back. Okay. Destiny, you are next.
I mean, I don't agree with the full-on abolish the police or defund the police stuff, but I think that it is important to look at why so many people in the United States feel the need to protest right now, even if we don't feel like there's a grossly excessive amount of Black people being killed, or even if the percentages are or appear to be pretty small. I think it's important to understand the grievances of why some people might feel like they're being disproportionately treated in the U.S. I mean, the Black Lives Matter marches right now aren't solely for police violence. We've had public health officials talking about lack of public health available for Black people as well. There are other issues that should be paid attention to as well. So I think it's good to just be mindful at least of why, if there's not all this violence against Black people or horrible treatment, why does that perception exist? And if you have an answer better than the liberal media, it would probably be helpful for having that conversation.
Okay, next is LTCRfan.
Okay. Let's all remember what the definition of terrorism is. The definition of terrorism is using violence to achieve political ends or to influence the public for political ends. And so many of these Antifa terrorists, which remember Antifa is arguably a terrorist organization, and just because it's not a formal organization is taking form over substantively it is a terrorist organization. Terrorism is using, and so let's take a look at some of these protests. These protests are saying, I'm going to engage in violence and I'm going to burn down buildings. We've had IEDs been thrown at police, spike strips, lasers that have permanently blinded police. They've been using bear spray, which is way stronger than regular pepper spray and is a felony to use. All of this violence, and they're demanding political ends. That's the textbook definition of terrorism. And so this is demonizing all police. This is all about 2020. Go to Google Trends and look at Black Lives Matter. The last time it was of any of interest is in 2016. And so what's hilarious too is that all of these protests are going on in the middle of coronavirus. It's so ridiculous. It's just like, I can't believe that these leftists will sit here and justify this in the middle of a coronavirus pandemic. I think that's always funny. And then especially hilarious because these are completely local issues. Crime is these are local crime stories, and these are Democrat cities in Democrat states. A lot of these cities have been run by Democrats for 50 years. And you know what? If we want to change in these local jurisdictions, I'm all in favor of it. But the funny thing is the solution is always to vote Democrat. Tell me, if you've had a city that's run by Democrats for 50 years and your change solution is to vote Democrat, how's that going to work? It's not going to work. So I 100% back to blue. Most of our law enforcement officers are heroes. 95% of them, 99% of them, whatever it is, are good heroes. And I think it's grotesque to try to politicize them solely for 2020 purposes to try to hurt Trump. The great thing is, though, and I'm happy to report,
wrap it up.
this is 100% backfiring. This is helping Trump big time.
Okay, I don't have much to comment, but that thing about bear spray, I've been watching a lot of Dog the Bounty Hunter episodes recently. Bear spray is really serious. That stuff's crazy. Prime, you're next.
Oh, okay. So I've definitely enjoyed a meeting lecture fan. This has been an experience. So thank you for that. Yeah. So I want to say that just throwing out there that Black Lives Matter protest didn't contribute to the spread of COVID-19 surge. Has been studied on this. I can provide that from healthline.com. That's not actually a thing. But also, it's so important. It's so important that we actually take the full context of BLM or the George Floyd protest as well. It's not just deaths, okay? I see that people are trying to ignore that point, right? Consistently, the conservatives have been trying to ignore that point. I'm not going to fight on the grounds that they have laid out. It's the whole system, the systemic racism that we keep mentioning, right? It's the way these institutions treat African Americans and other people of color, right? And also working class white people, to be fair. It's the way that these people have been degraded, have been humiliated, have been beaten, right? All these things can happen before a death happens, right? So this is the full spectrum of that. And African Americans have been trying to put these issues on the table for a very long time. And it seems that each successive generation of white people has to be reminded of that, right? From the civil rights movement until the LA riots, right? Till now, it seems like everyone forgets. Everyone is shocked when the images come out on TV of violent, thuggish police behavior. But we don't forget. We in this community, we experience it constantly, right? We're simply reminding you of what's going on. But this is the daily lives of so many people. So I just want to put that out there. It's not just deaths, but.
Okay, next is Bastiat.
Yeah, so I just dropped a link in the chat demonstrating first that this notion that all the violence that has gone on here, which is a minority share of what has gone on in terms of a vastly peaceful protest, some of the violence has been instigated by white supremacist criminals. The Minneapolis Police Department just found out about that and issued an affidavit to get more data on the umbrella man who began the destruction of property and violence in Minneapolis when a lot of this stuff touched off. So this idea that this is all some coordinated violent movement is nonsense. But Since LTCRfan brought up Saul Alinsky, I've got this little book by Saul Alinsky called Rules for Radicals, and I think I'd like to read a paragraph from it real quick just to kind of capture the spirit of what I think Black Lives Matter is really about here, all right? I think it's a throwback to the American revolutionary spirit of trying to make this country a better, freer place. And you want to say there's some Marxists involved? So what? There's a few Marxists involved. Our revolution was sparked off by slaveholders and whiskey smugglers, all right? You can make a good end from a few bad eggs. The great American dream that reached out to the stars has been lost to the stripes. We've forgotten where we've come from, ladies and gentlemen. We don't know where we are, and we fear where we may be going. Afraid, we turn from the glorious adventure of the pursuit of happiness to the pursuit of an illusionary security in an ordered, stratified, striped society. Our way of life has symbolized the world by the stripes of police force. At home, we've made a mockery of being our brother's keeper by being his jail keeper. When Americans can no longer see the stars, the times are tragic. We must believe that it is in the darkness before the dawn of a beautiful new world. We will see it when we believe it. Right there. So that's left-wing radical lunatic Saul Alinsky calling out the best of American tradition, our great American Revolution, still relevant today as ever.
Okay, next is IRI.
Well, that's a tough act to follow. Well said, Bastiat. I come on these panels to not just engage, but to listen and try to learn from my friends on the right a bit. And I find it really surprising to hear Sushi advocate for violence for political purposes, a violence against the police of all people as well. I mean, that's a shocker. I didn't think I'd come on here and hear that, but those were the words out of his mouth saying, keep doing it because it's helping us. So I'm never one for violence. I don't think that's a solution ever to anything. And I think that, as Bastiat and Prime and Destiny mentioned, these are mostly peaceful protests. I've seen it with my own two eyes. I encourage everyone to get out there and exercise your First Amendment right and join these people. And I applaud BLM for the work they've done and shining a light on an issue. And I think there's going to be real change from this. I think people are starting to realize that we don't need to send an armed officer to every single 911 call. I think we've put too much on the police, also asking them to take care of all of society's problems, from chasing dogs to dealing with people that are having a mental episode, to someone upset that there's homeless people out front, right? I think caseworkers and unarmed officers could help a lot more of these people deal with the cause, not the effect. So.
Okay. That was the first topic. If somebody directed a comment at you and you did not get to respond, the intro to the next topic is the last time you'll be able to address anything concerning the last topic. But use your time wisely. If you go too long, I will start asking you to wrap it up. Anybody who subbed or followed, I really appreciate it. Just wanted to throw that out there. I really appreciate the support. Helps me keep the show running. Okay, the next topic is pretty simple. Not a very lengthy question. Should Confederate statues come down? You can say it's contextually in this situation, if the local supported, blah, blah, blah. You can bring it in any context you want. I'll say it one more time. Should Confederate statues come down? I'm going to start in a different corner of the stream this time with the Doghouse Show.
Oh, yeah, I get to be the starter here. All right. Well, I don't think this is a very yes or no question for me. I think it's very contextual. I think that as a form of compromise, I've seen a few things that I would say are definitely up to the citizens of that particular community. I'll leave some of the meat and potatoes for the conversation. It's not a very big topic to really try to prepare for. So I'm going to save some of it for a little bit later. But yeah, I think that overall it's very contextual. I think that a lot of things are misguided. That's about it for me right now.
Okay, next is Suspect Sushi.
Oh man, this is a throwback to the first stream I ever did with Dylan. So about Confederate statues, I'm indifferent. The way I look at it is if a local community takes to their council and want it down and they vote on it and they come to a consensus that they want it gone, I have no issue with them taking it down. My issue is with mob rule mentality, where you can just go and rip something down to the point where they rip down elk statues, abolitionist statues, Frederick Douglass statues. People it's just anger without direction, and I think that's just really, really ignorant and dumb. So yeah, if they vote it down and go do about it lawfully, go for it. If anyone tries to impede their process after going through it lawfully, then I have no issue with it, because at least they try to go through legal recourse originally. And also, quick thing with IRI, when you say that I advocate for violence against police, I feel like that basically means that you understand that quite often that the protests that you go to that are mostly peaceful tend to get pretty violent, or at the very least hyper antagonistic in nature towards police. So I appreciate you finally aligning with us on that and talking about how BLM protests are not the greatest. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, next is going to be last username.
So I am against all government-funded statues of any kind. I don't think the government has any business erecting monuments that are trying to influence you to worship particular people or ideas. People are particularly more problematic than ideas in general, but there's no real reason for that. As for the existing statues, I'd say, go ahead and take down anything that doesn't have like particular sort of coolness factor. Like I don't want to see the Statue of Liberty come down. Mount Rushmore is kind of neat. I don't think you have to get rid of that, but fine. If there's a Confederate general and it's pissing people off, then yeah, get rid of it. That said, on the general issue of statues, putting the government issue aside, it occurred to me recently that we sort of take it for granted that a statue is honoring someone or saying that we like them or they're good. That's not so obvious. It seems it sort of makes sense to me to have a statue of someone who we don't like or someone who is like a negative influence in history, but they were part of history. It's not so. I mean, perhaps we could have statues of people that we hate, and we could look at the statue and hate the statue. Maybe you could, let people graffiti it and then hose it down once a week or something. I don't know. It's just sort of a weird idea that occurred to me when I was thinking about this issue. Statues don't necessarily have to be good people. Maybe we can deliberately have statues of people we don't like. But I don't know. Something to think about. There you go.
Okay, next is LTCRfan.
Okay, this is another issue where it's not about Confederate statues. This is a double meaning issue with pretextualized justifications to try to gaslight the American people. This has nothing to do with Confederate statues. This has to do with attacking the very foundations of America as a whole, and they're heading towards George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. And so I think of it like this. If you have a house and you've got 4 walls and somebody comes up to you and says, hey, you've got one wall of your house that's really offensive to me. Can we take that wall down and then put it up with another wall? Most people would say, okay, sure, we can change it. But if that person came up to you and their intention was to tear your house down, totally destroy the thing and burn it down, and then what they really said to you, hey, you've got this one wall that I'd like to take down. Would you let them go and take that one wall down? Of course not. And so I'm opposed to doing this because it's a pretext to trying to destroy all of American history. And you know what? Moreover, if we're going to start destroying things and attacking things that have a history of Confederacy ties and slavery and Jim Crow and everything like that, then we ought to start with abolishing the Democrat Party first and foremost. And so, no, I'm not in favor of it. I think this is not some black and white issue with good and evil. In history, there's nobody that's perfect. Nobody's perfect. And it's okay to recognize the good things in people and also recognizing the bad things in people. A lot of these things are historic pieces of artwork that are being destroyed and defaced by mob rule. It's absolutely despicable. They're not even our statues. These statues belong to previous generations and future generations. And I just think it's so nasty to when it's not even your statue to destroy, when that's our future generations and our country's history and our country's statue. And you know what? The people that fought and died in the Civil War were willing to accept the South back into this country as brothers and sisters. But a woke leftist in 2020 just can't handle it. But people that actually fought and died were willing to accept them back without engaging in the cultural genocide that all you are pushing.
Okay, I actually wanted to ask you about that because we did have an engagement a while ago. Do you still stand by the idea that this is a form of genocide?
Look up the definition of a cultural genocide. The definition of cultural genocide is literally destroying artwork and statues that you disagree with. That's exactly what it is.
Okay, next is Destiny.
I just think it's really weird if you want to abolish the Democratic Party that you'd be defending keeping up statues of Democrats. But yeah, I mean, like it seems to me that we have so many issues in this country related to race relations. Keeping up statues of generals that represent a separatist extremist movement that try to break off from this country to maintain slavery is probably not the best look for us. I don't understand where the obsession comes from keeping up these particular statues. I mean, we can read about our history. We don't need statues of like extremist generals that try to break away from and destroy the United States to be kept up and honored and revered. I just think that's really, really strange to me. It seems to be a pretty anti-patriotic and anti-American idea to have those statues still around. But this is coming from somebody that supports the current 50-state union we have.
Okay, next is Prime.
Should the statues come down? Absolutely. Tear them all down. Melt them down. Turn them something more useful, like a sex toy, maybe. I don't know. But absolutely, these statues are useless. These statues were put up while African Americans were agitating for their rights, right? To remind them, to put them back in their place, right? That these are the people that we worship in our society, traitors, right? Traitors to America. We worship them and their evil cause. So yeah, tear them all down. They don't belong in a museum. They don't belong in anywhere where people can appreciate them, other than in the trash bin of history.
Okay, next is Bastiat.
Yeah, I got to say, to call the prospect of taking down these statues cultural genocide, I guess suggested what the American patriots at Concord Bridge who melted down the statue of King George to turn it into musket balls to shoot British soldiers were engaged in cultural genocide. I mean, it's a nonsensical, mind-boggling argument. It's important to remember, too, that there's absolutely nothing at all whatsoever in any universe redeeming about the Confederate States of America, a terrorist organization that tried to destroy the United States of America. And if you need any proof of that, it was founded from the beginning to be nothing but murder and tyranny and brutality from the start, an attempt to destroy this country, to preserve slavery forever. Look no further than Confederate Vice President Alexander Stephens' cornerstone speech that he read out to the Confederate Congress 3 weeks before the attack on Fort Sumter, where he said this country's foundations are, quote, laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and normal condition. This, our new government, is the first in the history of the world based on this great physical, philosophical, and moral truth. That's the legacy of the Confederacy. Everybody who fought for that. There was no nobility in any of it. It was all an attempt for this country. Nobody in the history of this country who's taken up arms against the United States of America in defense of slavery has a defense for it at all. They should
nice straw man. Nobody's defending it.
They should be taken down in accordance with the law. Of course, so I'd respect the wishes of the local people, but of course, if I had my way, I'd take them down in accordance with the law, sell them off to private owners who can decide what they want to do with them.
So
No, it's not open. And LTCRfan, you have been muted. You will be unmuted once the open conversation begins. And please, nobody clip Bastiat's speech out of context. Don't do that. That'd be very mean.
You just genocided LTCRfan. Thank you.
Ira, you're next.
Yeah, I agree with taking down these statues. When you start to dig into the history of why they were put up and when, you start to connect the dots. And most of these statues went up when people were pushing back against Jim Crow laws between the 1900s, 1920s, and then another round went up in the 50s and 60s during the Civil Rights Movement. So it's no surprise why the statues went up. It's also kind of weird that they chose to pick military figures from the Confederacy, right? That seems like a strange type of person to celebrate. And also look where they put the statues. They are on state houses. They are at educational institutes, courthouses. These are places of power. And that was done on purpose. So I agree with our presumptive Democratic candidate, Joe Biden, that we should take these statues down, put them in museums. They don't belong in these places of power.
Hey, since LTCRfan, you had a very passionate reaction, I could see that. I will actually give you first say, since I know you want to engage with people.
Okay, thank you. Bastiat is just completely straw manning, and he's arguing very passionately against the position that nobody has. Nobody's defending the Confederacy. Nobody's defending slavery, and so good for you. Wow, you're so brave. You're so brave to argue against the Confederacy. Why? And then
Let's finish.
No, but and I'm really important, and Destiny and Bastiat, you guys are all doing this thing where it's like there's this extreme position that people don't like that the left has, which is literally that America itself is founded upon racism, and we're rejecting the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, despite the fact that every single civil rights leader up until the modern woke leftist has recognized that our founding documents were the greatest thing to promote equality between the races and set us on a path to the end of slavery. Martin Luther King Jr. talked about it. Frederick Douglass talked about it. But now today we're going to reject that. This is going against everything America was founded upon, and the end goal is to destroy America. And so for you guys to just say, oh, well, we just don't like the Confederacy, and oh, we want to take down this one statute, that those are positions that have broad agreement. That's not the issue. The issue is whether we hate the United States and want to destroy the United States and have a literal revolution.
No, the issue literally is, do we want to protect statues of people who hated the United States and wanted to destroy it? Obviously, you ask me, well, do you think you should then tear down the statue of George Washington? Of course not, because I can make a very basic argument, and that is that the Confederates, not a goddamn one of them did anything redeeming. All right, they were all a negative force in the world, whereas the United States, all of them, every last one of them was trying to destroy this country by default. Meanwhile, the founding fathers of this country, slaveholders that most of them were, at least the signatories of the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution is another issue. You can make a very clear argument that they nevertheless contributed a lot of good, not just to this country, but to the collective heritage of mankind. You can't make that claim for a Confederate. So I don't worry about this issue of, well, first they came for the Confederate statues, but I wasn't a defender of the Confederacy, so I didn't speak up. It's nonsense. You can oppose those statues without therefore giving up all the things that are good about the United States and its history.
Well, you're being used by the left for a broader project that I guess you disagree with, which I guess makes you a useful idiot.
Yeah, that's nonsense. First of all, I don't even know who you mean by the left. Do you mean people who oppose the Confederacy? Is that the left?
No.
Do you mean the criminals who violated the law and tore down statues of George Washington? Because in most of this country, nobody's tried to engage in a legal process to get rid of those statues, and those which were torn down in violation of the law will probably be put back up.
How about mainstream Democrats like Senator Duckworth, who literally said, yeah, let's talk about tearing down statues of George Washington?
Yeah. She's a pandering fool. I'm not tearing down a statue of George Washington. If you're going to tell me I need to stand by her, no, I reject what she's saying. But the question here was, do we tear down Confederate statues? Yes or no? Not what else is, first they came for the Confederates, now they're coming for Washington. No, I'm saying keep Washington up and tear Jefferson, tear Lee, and all the other people who tried to defeat Abraham Lincoln down. Not a complex point. Making simple distinctions here between good and evil.
Okay, well, I think it's pretty interesting. Do you understand why Robert E. Lee actually defected from the north to the south?
Yeah, because he was a coward. He was more concerned with his loyalty than with loyalty to the United States, which he swore an oath to.
Historically, why he did it?
The United States of America, and he violated it.
Okay, Bastiat, let him. Okay. Suspect Sushi, I didn't get to hear anything what you just said. Could you please repeat it?
I'm saying if you don't understand historically the reasons as to why he defected, then I don't think you should just fucking rail and virtue signal about it.
Tell me
Robert
why.
Lee, for the rampant amount of war crimes the Union was doing against the South, and the fact that Abraham Lincoln was basically infringing on the sovereign states' rights by demanding troops, supplies, and safe passage from the north they called North-South states into the South so they can attack their what they would consider as their Southern brothers. So when Robert E. Lee saw these things, that's the reason why he did it. He did it to defend his homeland. He did it to defend his fellow statesmen, and he did it because he saw rampant war crimes. So you can't say because he was a coward. It wasn't because he was fearing the win. He left knowing full well the Union was going to win. Just so
if he knew the Union was going to win and he actively tried to fight against it anyway in the service of slavery, that sounds like a lot of that sounds like a lot of nonsense to me. But let's talk about the war crimes you're mentioning here. The war crimes you're mentioning here, this is a very important point. You're talking about war crimes. President Lincoln was enforcing the law on the southern states who had no right to break away from this country. When you break away from the United States of America, it's very important to ensure that this is a clearly made point. When you break away from the Union, you are saying to all of your citizens, whether they supported it or not, you're no longer an American. You no longer have constitutional rights. Nobody has the right to abrogate those constitutional rights by majority.
Okay. Suspect.
That never happened.
Okay. Suspect. Okay. I said okay. Stop. Suspect Sushi, you respond, then I'm going to throw it to Prime, and then it's going to go to Doghouse because you've both been having your hands up.
Oh, can I do it after?
Easy.
Heaven forbid the fact that Thomas Jefferson, 53 years prior, basically prohibited the increase in slave trade to America. Let's just table that part. But let's talk about the fact that the Corwin Amendment was entirely and unilaterally passed with just northern states. The South was not a part of the vote whatsoever. That through the Constitution, protect the institution of slavery. The North profited from slavery just as much as the South did. So don't just say that they're a fucking guiding light on who's morally correct in that war. The Union would dude. Abraham Lincoln said, "A house divided cannot stand." He didn't give a fuck about slavery, and he was also a radical abolitionist. He wasn't like, "Oh, black people should be free in America." It was, "Oh, black people should be free to go back to Africa." So don't fucking just sit here and grandstand about the fucking Union when it's bullshit in nature.
Yeah, first of all, it's very revealing that the folks who are defending the Confederacy have already taken their claws out to tear down our own great country. So that's very revealing. Shows they've got no principles whatsoever.
Dude,
but beyond that, if you want to talk about Abraham Lincoln,
one at a time.
He said very clearly that if he could save the Union by freeing some slaves or no slaves or all the slaves, that he would do it. Of course, he did say that, but he also spent a lifetime talking about the danger of slavery to this country and about how a house divided against itself could not stand. So to frame him as some kind of a slathering slave supporter is nonsense. The Union, the states in the North had worked to abolish slavery. The states in the South made it stronger. So it was definitely a clear case of good versus bad in that sense
both
alone.
the North and the South. Right.
Yeah, okay.
Then, like I said, once again, the tariffs levied against the South.
Oh yeah.
Even though the New York generated the most federal, the most taxes for the nation, that's just because it had to control the most ports. But all the raw goods from the South was tariffed heavily, brought to the North, and the profits they were making enriched their railroads and their harbors and their infrastructure more than the South. There was a consistent with the Treaty of Paris, they identified that the original colonies were sovereign states. The federal government was created purely to do a very few amount of things. When Abraham Lincoln started infringing on those rights, they started to secede.
Those rights to what?
Okay. This is not the Bastiat Suspect Sushi show. We got to give it to Prime and then Doghouse. Okay. Well, yeah, you pulled each other into it. Prime.
So this nonsense about keeping up the statutes of traitors. What other traitors should we put up? What about British loyalists? Should they have statues? Benedict Arnold, should he be celebrated? Maybe, I don't know, because apparently we're hearing from conservatives, the great patriots of America, as they always like to let us know, that the statutes of traitors are always welcome here on the state. Yeah, so I disagree with that completely. But in terms of statues overall, I honestly think that every statue should be up for debate. Every symbol, all these public symbols should be up for debate. It doesn't matter from the worst Confederate soldier up to MLK, the MLK thing they have up in Washington, D.C. now. All of that, all those monuments should be up for debate. We as a culture should be continuously critically thinking about these things that we put up as sites of civic worship. Do these people still embody the values of our current day society? And if they don't, take them down. Every single one of them. Doesn't matter.
How do we settle those debates?
What'd you say?
How do we settle those debates?
Democratically.
So I want to hit on this real quick because I keep hearing the word traitor being thrown on. Can anybody point to me a specific general that was actually convicted of guilty or not guilty of being a traitor, or is that
Hold on.
I was trying to make sure
attacking the U.S. Hold on. Attacking the U.S. is not treason.
I'm not saying that. I'm just asking because we're labeling him as a traitor, so I'm trying to understand.
No. I'll take the real difficult position here of saying that if you take up arms against an American soldier and you're an American citizen, you're a traitor. And the fact that we didn't then prosecute them for treason in the interest of trying to reunify the country doesn't mean, actually none of them committed treason. No, they were all treasoners. They were all traitors in every real sense.
Okay.
If you read the context of what everything was going on,
let him respond.
The reason why they didn't want to do it is because they didn't want to put the challenge of secession in the Supreme Court.
It went to the Supreme Court.
Documents.
You are wrong.
It did. How late? How much later? How much later?
1869, the Supreme Court ruled on the question of secession directly when they found that the states had never left the Union because, of course, our Articles of Confederation said that they were forming a perpetual union, and the Constitution that replaced them said they were forming a more perfect union. And as the Supreme Court said, what could be more indissoluble than a perpetual union made perfect? There is no question that secession was illegal from the start. It was an obvious crime, and the Supreme Court didn't shy away from it.
Yeah, later on, but then no one was charged with being a
Yeah,
traitor.
it takes a few years to do a Supreme
wasn't-
Court case in 1865,
Okay.
right? You know?
Damn, wait, we didn't.
Yeah,
was
you're
Hitler
next.
charged with anything at Nuremberg? Holy shit! Maybe he didn't commit any crimes either, right?
So here's the thing I wanted to hit on too, as well, in terms of what Prime was saying as well with the flag, or sorry, not the flag, leaving it up to the citizens. Something that I had seen recently was the Mississippi flag thing. This was pretty troubling to me because this was brought up in 2001. In 2001, I guess Mississippi found out that they didn't really have an official state flag, and so they left it up to the citizens. They adjourned a committee basically to bring up the flag. And they presented it to the people of Mississippi. Mississippi said, no, we don't want it. And they left it up. What found it very troubling to me was that just recently, in the past month or two, they ended up doing the same exact bill, basically. But at the very end of it, they added that they would actually take down, the legislators said it would be taken down and suspended. And then they would convene a committee. So now what you've got is now you've got nobody deciding. Now you've got really a decision of, do you want a flag or not? Right. And this is something I'm adamantly opposed to. I'm like, this isn't something okay. I think it should have been left up to the people to decide whether or not that flag should have come down or not. So I would just leave that in there as well. I don't necessarily disagree that should happen. That people should be able to decide. I think people should be able to decide what gets taken down and put up in their things. I don't think it should be forcibly taken down.
Destiny, it's your turn.
I'm kind of curious for people in here. I guess Sushi Lecture Fan Doghouse, like, how many people in here think that the Civil War was not principally about slavery?
I don't think it was the single largest contributing factor, no. Especially when only between 5 and 10% of the overall population owned slaves.
Owned slaves? Yeah.
And on top of that, the Union also had slave holders.
I would
So
say
they would be the most
I would
powerful
probably
people
say
who
that.
had those slaves, though, correct? Right?
But see, here's the thing.
most
Here's
powerful
One at
people,
a time.
the
One
most-
at a time. Prime.
I would just say that even if there was a small percentage of people who owned slaves, those would be the most powerful people who have their or who are in government, correct?
Well, okay, if you actually want to do that, the number actually gets considerably smaller. The 10% number actually comes from including people who had like quite literally one indentured servant, things of that nature. So
okay.
so it includes all of that. So if you include all even
but the large plantations.
10%. But if you talk about like large plantation owners and people in government, it gets vastly smaller. I don't know the exact number, but I know it's a little under 5%.
Yeah, but they would be the most wealthy people, and the state would be protecting them, correct? Right? Protecting their interests.
The state would be?
Well, I mean, the Confederates, the Confederacy, right?
Oh, you mean you're talking about when the Confederacy was created, they'd want to protect their most wealthy people?
Yeah, the whole point is that like the most powerful people, right, wanted to keep their power, right? Their power came from slavery. So the very fact that even if there was a small number of people who owned slaves, it was the right people who owned slaves in terms of those large plantations. So yes, they would have used their influence, their political influence, to protect that power, correct?
Sure, but like you also are not accounting for the 90 to 95% of the people who did not own slaves in any capacity and were most likely like, like farmers, like, like hunters and things like that, who profited it in no way from the slave trade whatsoever. So
hold on. You just went on, first of all, a whole talk about how many people profited from slavery. Even
I'm saying most of the fighting force.
Correct.
I'm saying most of the fighting force didn't have like an economic, like a lot of people cite the issues where people thought that if slaves were freed, they would create a lower waged people in the workforce. But actually, there is a book. If you give me like maybe a couple minutes, there's a book where it's between about 1,000 soldiers, both Confederate and the Union, and the foundation of the actual war was about the interpretations of the Constitution in primary.
So the work being done by slaves, it doesn't matter if you own a slave or not. Like the work that's done can be had by all, right? So if slaves build a building and then you use that building, I don't know, for a university or something like that, who knows? And people study in that building, then for all that time that building is up, people are benefiting from that building. If they pick cotton that is turned to a shirt, then people are benefiting from that. So even if they're not directly It's not. They don't
Okay,
directly
that's the
own the
case.
slave.
The
Like,
entirety of America
and
benefited
again,
from
and
that,
again,
right?
it doesn't
Finish.
even matter for my point, because the point is that the people in power had slaves, right? They were greatly benefiting from the institution, so they directed the state or the newly formed state to defend their benefits.
Okay,
Also,
and do you
this
understand?
conversation is so confusing to me because it seems like we get into this conversation where we like bring up the traitor argument or we bring up the Confederate argument, but then we revolve right back into the slavery argument. So I'm still confused as to why we should take down the statue, if it should be both of them or if it should be just because of slavery. Because if it's both of them, then where does that buck stop? I mean, I guess that's where I'm confused, because
It doesn't
we're
stop.
constantly like
Well, having statues of a
Yeah,
people
okay.
separate off your nation is really weird. I just don't understand why anybody who's a patriotic, like nation-loving American would want to have statues commemorating people that literally tried to split your nation in half. It's like one of the most It's literally one of the most divisive things you can
Did
do.
I come out of
Here's why. Here's why.
Real quick.
Okay.
So she keeps saying, I don't know why you keep bringing up like, oh, well, both sides benefited from slavery. Like slavery was obviously like more advantageous to the South than the North. Like the
Doesn't matter.
entire South, like
Finish.
matter.
Let him
Slavery
finish.
is bad
Suspect.
either way.
Suspect.
It,
Yeah,
it
let him
doesn't
finish.
matter. Wait. I'm just saying that, like, to keep pretending that the South and the North had the same reliance on slavery when the South's like entire agricultural system was fueled by slaves, and manufacturing and other forms of goods and services were available in the North is hugely disingenuous. Like to pretend that both sides relied on this the same amount is just not true.
Well, actually,
you can
okay,
look at
wait.
the-
Okay, wait. That was Bastiat. Bastiat, that was pretty directly aimed at Sushi. I'd love to hear Sushi respond. You can go into it after.
So you're telling me that the raw goods that was absolutely needed from the South to the North for their for them to like have any type of exports when it came to like raw goods of tobacco and cotton and things of that nature. You're telling me that they didn't benefit even though they made more profit than what they got sold to them from the South? Like, are you kidding me? All I'm saying is this: don't make a morality claim about the Civil War when both sides obviously benefit, in my opinion, because of the fact that the New York City, whose largest exports were cotton and tobacco, primarily picked by slaves, were the hugest benefits and the largest benefactors of the federal government's tax revenue. What I'm telling you right here is stop being like, oh, it's about good versus evil. Oh, it was about slavery, when there was considerably more nuance to the issue at hand.
No one is saying that it's about. Wait, hold on. Response to me. No one is saying that it's. Or I'm not trying to make any claims about good or evil. I'm just saying that oftentimes we try to make like really bullshit claims behind the pretend that we're being nuanced. Like there is no nuance here. To try to say that like, well, both sides benefited from slavery. Yeah, of course. Anything down a supply chain is going to depend on things that are above on the higher part of the supply chain. But that higher part of the supply chain literally wouldn't exist. Like the entire economy of the South almost wouldn't exist without slaves. Like, did the North benefit from having supply chains that were located in the South? Yeah, sure, but they would have survived regardless. Like, I mean, like, sure, they might have incentivized it, but they were also fighting against it. So it was pretty clear that the North was more willing to give up slavery than the South was. Nobody disputes this. Like, and the idea that the North was just as reliant on slaves as the South, when the South was, feeling things to the North, is just a ridiculous proposition. It's just
so when they protect the institution of slavery with the Corwin Amendment, and I understand when it was passed in 1861, like states were already seceding, but that's all after consistent trampling of the sovereign states' rights. It's actually, huh? No, it's actually about multiple things. It was actually about multiple things. It was not
part of which was slavery. Big deal, but go ahead.
Which rights?
Okay, but like, here's the thing. That's what I'm talking about. When people like my issue with it is not about slavery being a contributing factor to the reason why the Civil War happened. It's that people say it's the only reason, as if years and years of historical trampling over sovereign states' rights, or like tariffs and taxes that was like what was considered, at least in their interpretation, was considerably more punitive to the South. I'm not an apologist in any means, but I've looked this up quite often and quite regularly and debate it very consistently.
Okay. I gotta. Bastiat's been waiting for so long. He's been so eager. I gotta throw the Bastiat.
You are not an apologist for the South in the way that the folks who say, well, actually, only so many people, it wasn't actually 6 million people who were killed in the Holocaust. Let's be real about the history, folks. Okay, let's be real about the history, guys. That's the kind of apology you are engaging. You are minimizing the role of slavery. You are literally lifting lines from the King Cotton speech when the Confederates dared the world to let them leave. To try and imagine that the world could go without Confederate cotton. I mean, this idea that it was about tariffs. No, you can look at a map of the states that had slavery and the proportions in which they had them. The states that had the most slaves For example, South Carolina and Mississippi, the first two to go. South Carolina had more slaves per capita than any other, was the first one to try and dissolve the Union to keep its slaves. So this notion that, well, it was tariffs too. And, look, tariffs were certainly a part of American policy back then. And you were also right that there were some Northerners who were sympathetic. Like, for example, some of the traders you mentioned in New York, some of whom were sympathetic. And in fact, New York had a history of sympathy with the South because of that economic tie. But at the end of the day, the United States had the ability to abolish slavery under federal law and under state law, and certainly some states in the United States did. Many northern states right after the American Revolution did, and did for the decades afterward. Meanwhile, the southern states expanded it, and in the Confederate Constitution, they made it permanent. They ensured that it could never be abolished. So this idea that it wasn't about slavery, or that it wasn't, that it was all the same, there's no splitting hairs there, there's no making distinctions, is absolutely wrong. 49% of free white households own slaves in Mississippi. This was not some 1%.
Bastiat saying right now that statues, it's all about slavery. He said it there. It's all about slavery. So the statues are about slavery. You said it's all about slavery.
I just got done
talking about
the Civil
War was about slavery.
Okay, one at a time.
But yeah, I also think it's about traitors. Absolutely. You take arms up against the federal government of the United States as an American. Right? Yeah, that if you're shooting American soldiers, you're a traitor.
Okay, so it's about slavery then. So any statue then that has anything to do with slavery should be taken down. Is that what the assumption is being made here? Or any kind of link to slavery should be taken down? Is that the presumption you're taking?
No, I made the distinction earlier when LTCRfan brought up the point about taking down the statue of George Washington. If George Washington's life had nothing else redeeming about it, he'd just been a slaveholder who never contributed anything that outweighed that, sure, there's a great argument to take down the statue, but he didn't. In fact, George Washington was the first leader in modern times who literally was willing to give up power after having the appellation of his entire country. As King George said, if he gives up power, he'll be the greatest man in the world. He was admired by generations of people in his own time around the world. So obviously, George Washington contributed a lot to the history of this country. Robert E. Lee contributed nothing except piles of dead Americans.
Okay, so you can finish, and then we got to throw it over to Prime because Prime's been waiting a while.
Yeah, Prime's been waiting. I totally hijacked that.
Okay,
so I'll let Prime.
Prime.
Oh, just saying that the an 1860 census shows that in the states that would soon succeed from the Union, an average of more than 32% of white families owned enslaved people. Some states had far more slave owners, 46% of families in South Carolina, 49% in Mississippi, to back up Bastiat's point, while some had far less, 20% of families in Arkansas. So the issue of slavery, it cannot be understated. So I don't know where Suspect Sushi was getting his numbers from. But in any case, I think it's all a bit of a distraction. They were traitors to the country. They killed Americans, right? I feel like if it was any other force, right, that had come in and murdered Americans in those numbers, that we'd all be against it. But for some reason, that it just happens to be that a state that held up the white patriarchy above all else, right? That one, the conservatives seem to be holding that one up. I don't know why. Why that seems to be their favorite. But in any case, it doesn't matter. These statues should go down because they are insult to many brave Americans who died against them, fighting against them, and also the African Americans who still live today, having a look at those traitors memorialized.
I want to say,
yeah, I did actually want to throw it to you over. I want to throw it to IRI, last username, and then LTCRfan because they haven't been talking a lot recently.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just letting people duke it out here, but I want to what I've heard from our friends on the right here is right in line with what the purpose was of erecting these statues. If you Google something called the Lost Cause, it's an attempt to rewrite history, and erecting these statues was part of that, to try to say that, well, the deck was always stacked against the South and it wasn't all that bad, and it was about states' rights. It wasn't really about slavery. This is an attempt to rewrite history, and these specific statues are part of that. And that's why they are military figures. It's a lot different than the Washington Monument, where you can look at this piece of art and wonder for yourself what it means. But when you see a military figure in all their glory that represented the South, that sends a strong message.
Last username.
Okay, so a few things. I mean, someone was saying, criticizing that the North benefited from the slavery in the South. I mean, part of what it means to be, you know, the United States is that it's a free trade zone, right? Obviously, there's going to be trade. To, you know, the only way for the North not to benefit from slavery would be to have some sort of economic embargo against the South. At which point, you might as well just split the country up or have a civil war, which they did. So, also, I want to ask, how should we, like, more generally, like the issue with, you know, Confederate generals aside, like, generally speaking, how should we decide what public statues get put up? Prime said democratically. So 51% of people want a statue to go up. Is that enough? If it like royally triggers the other 49%, is it still okay? Or do we does it have to be like 90% or something? And then what if like some little town is full of people with the most like abhorrent views? You know, there's got to be some little town out there, and they vote to put some horrible statue up unanimously, but it pisses everyone else off. Is that okay?
It has to come from the public. It has to be done democratically because it's a publicly funded thing. They're publicly funded dollars. If you just got some little town and you want to put up some fucking statue of Hitler or some shit, I mean, if there are no federal funds going through it, if it's a public courthouse, it's funded by your own little town or whatever. I mean, I guess fuck it, go for it. But if you're like in an area
where fund it themselves,
what?
I mean, at that point, why not just say like privately fund the statue? Get the people who like the statue and they pay for it.
Well, because chances are, well, I mean, you can do that in your front lawn. If you want to put up whatever statue you want on your private front lawn, you can do that. But we're talking about, like, no, that's not what the debate is. The debate is at public courthouses, right? Public courthouses that are supposed to represent what the public wants. Well, if you ask what the public wants and how do you determine what publicly funded statues are put in public areas, well, the public decides. It's democratically done.
Yeah, well, do you think it's important to have any public statues at all?
Well, I mean, that's a hard question. Personally, no, I don't give a fuck about any of this shit. But that's who I am. But for some people, yeah, having symbols of their past is deeply inspiring. Some people want to see, you know, like statues of great generals and have some idea of, you know, some historical context, or it gives you more appreciation for the country that we live in today. I mean, when you start asking like, well, why have anything at all? I mean, you can literally ask, well, why have anything at all? Why should we have movies or art or movies? Or I'm sorry, or video games.
What? Like, rather than instead of like a private statue where you get everyone in the town who actually likes this guy puts their money together and puts a statue up of that guy, and the people who don't like him don't have to pay for it.
I mean, statues are like a decoration. Nobody wants to walk into a courthouse and it looks like something I would build in Minecraft. It's just like a giant cube with nothing there, right? People probably want art. People probably want monuments. People want something to the state. Like, and yeah, those are probably is going to be like in the form of statues or honoring like historical events or something, right?
I mean, you could just have art that doesn't like honor any particular people. I mean, just have some nice courtroom that doesn't.
I sympathize with your point, last username. I think that, like, for example, if you're really committed to Confederate history and all that, there's nothing preventing you, and I'm certainly not arguing for any kind of ban of putting up a Confederate statue on your own property. But the question is, should you require people to pay for monuments which were, as has already been pointed out here, erected in many cases as a form of intimidation against African Americans and maintained as such? I, for example, we had a Confederate monument where I live. And that Confederate monument, as recently as 1975, was used as a focal point for anti-civil rights protests by the Ku Klux Klan. So this is stuff that, you know, within the lifetimes of people alive today was used to agitate against the freedom of our fellow citizens. So it's, you know, that's the issue.
I got to pass it over to LTCRfan. He's been waiting extremely patiently.
Thank you. This whole conversation is just so detached from reality, and it's so full of virtue signaling where the alleged virtue is hate for the South. The reality is that we've got a country where the quote unquote paper of record did a 1619 project, which literally attempted to smear and delegitimize the entire United States by saying the real founding of the United States was 1619 when the first slave was brought over here, which is a purposeful attack on the entire United States. And so we've got the 1619 project. We've got mob rule where they're not democratically tearing down these pieces of artwork. They're viciously tearing it down. And then we've got I'm Really Important and everybody else making these nuanced arguments about a specific statue that was put up for this one specific reason, as if that's the debate. That's not the debate. The debate is whether we're going to have mindless mobs illegally destroying and defacing pieces of artwork as part of a larger project to destroy the United States. That's the debate. The debate's not some localized democratic debate about a single monument, which is maybe 100% bad, which that's maybe some of these are. And if that really was the debate, if there was one that was 100% bad and it was democratically processed through, you wouldn't probably have a big debate. We have a big debate because that's not what's going on here. And in fact, a lot of this is not just black and white. And I'm so sick of the virtue signaling about who can hate the South the most. You know, it's like they're Americans too. Southerners are Americans, and everybody thinks they're so proud to just hate anybody from the South. And a lot of these statues and memorials are of dead Americans. We accepted the South back into the United States as American. Look, I'm not a Southerner. I am from the Mountain West. I don't give a shit about Southern history, but I'm a fair-minded person, and these things are not all black and white issues. And Bastiat wants to sit here and say every single Southerner during the Civil War was 100% evil with no redeeming qualities. That's so arrogant and conceited and acting like you're so much better than everybody. And then to try to act like the argument is about whether you support slavery or not. That's not the argument. And quit virtue signaling and saying I'm so cool because I'm opposed to slavery. Yo, if that's right, you know what? As a religious right-wing Christian, I'm the heirs of the abolition movement. The abolition movement to abolish slavery was a religious right-wing Christian movement, period, full stop, end of story. And so that's really what the issue is. And this whole conversation is detached from reality and nothing but virtue signaling on things that everybody agrees with.
I gotta give it to Bastiat. He was directly attacked.
Southerners in here because I'm a Southerner, and he just called me out. Let me tell you something. Maybe you didn't hear it in my drawl, but I am a Southerner. I've lived here all my goddamn life. And I'll tell you, you made a distinction there that I don't appreciate. You said that I'm trying to vilify the South or vilify Southerners. I am trying to vilify the Confederate States of America and everybody who is in the official service of that criminal conspiracy, that criminal attempt to destroy the United States. There were many brave Southerners who fought against the Confederacy, who were loyal to the Union and the cause of justice and human freedom. And this notion that we're out against the South is nonsense. I'm out against historical revisionism, trying to frame the Confederacy as the legacy of the South. The South has come a long goddamn way.
You want your gold medal yet, buddy? I can give you your gold medal if you want it.
Yeah, I'll take it.
You're, like, super
I think
If you're in the South,
Okay. We're gonna go with Destiny. Then it'll be straight to suspect. I promise.
if you're in the South and you want to fly a flag to honor your country, like we have one. It has 13 stripes. It's got 50 stars. It's the American flag. The Confederate flag is not an American flag. This was a separate country that broke off. It was not the United States. To try to say that these people were Americans, I mean, they were in the same way that, you know, in the early revolution, the Americans were the British. They used to be, but that's not what you call them after they seceded.
But they became Americans when we accepted them back. You guys are acting like we should have never accepted the South back. Why should do you think that we should have accepted the South?
Well, let's let Destiny finish his point first.
But we didn't bring them back in as their own Confederate States of America. We brought them back in as part of the United States of America. The same way that we don't, or I imagine if you were German, you wouldn't be flying Nazi flags around. It's not like you killed every single person that was a Nazi when you brought them back in. Much the same, we're not going to kill every single person that was part of the Confederacy when you brought them back in. It's not a moral issue like all these people were evil. I'm not saying that, but it's really weird that you would fetishize or defend a group of people that broke off from our country to try to rebel against it. They broke off, they lost the war. They came back. Yeah, but then why are you defending them saying like these are American? The Confederate, nothing about the Confederate flag is American. We have an American flag. Why would you defend one from another country that tried to exist as a separatist nation from our own?
Well, we're not talking about the Confederate flag, but again, I'm not the one that says the Confederate flag stands for different. The rebel flag stands for different things to different people. I don't know because I'm not from the South. I don't have a rebel flag. But I know lots of people who say that what it means to them is they have a family history of that, and that, you know, they recognize that it has bad parts of its history. They reject the bad part, but still recognize it as their family. And they had good people in their family with some good redeeming qualities. It's not this black and white issue where it only stands for one thing, and whoever can hate it the most is the most virtuous.
Would you have defended flying British flags in the early days of the United States if there were large groups of people that were still flying British flags?
There were.
I'm not asking if there were. I'm asking if you would defend it. Would you have been a loyalist? Okay. It feels like you literally would have been. It feels like you like. I'm curious. Would you defend that?
Yeah, because it's called freedom of speech.
I'm not asking if you have the freedom of speech to do it. I'm saying, would you say like, this is like you're honoring your heritage as British people, or do you think it'd be more important to recognize you've descended from being a British person and now you're an American person, right? You're no longer celebrating your British heritage because you're an American now. You can celebrate that, but you don't fly public flags honoring the British government, honoring the crown, the same way that you wouldn't fly a Confederate flag honoring a nation that is dissolved.
Okay, here, I'll answer it for you clearly. I 100% yes would be okay with Americans during the after the Revolutionary War still flying a British flag if they wanted to, because I believe in freedom of speech. Simple as that.
On public land, because that's what's at issue. Statues.
What?
and
Where is the
land.
Confederate flag
Under
flying on
public
public
money.
land?
Wait, really?
Yeah, it as recently as a couple of months ago, it was the flag of one of the United States, Mississippi.
Gotta throw this over to Suspect Sushi. He's been waiting for so long.
It was literally just one sentence. People were kind of getting in my ass about it. I actually want to do a revision on my statement where I said between 1% and 10%. It's actually if you take the number of slaveholders in relation to the overall population of free white men in the South, who once you could own land and things, it was 1.4%. So I mean, of course, it's Snopes, but. I mean, I like to think that they don't like right-wingers in any capacity. So I think that's good enough right there. So 1.4% overall of the entire South owned slaves in any capacity. So there you go.
Prime has been waiting so long. I got to throw it over to Prime too.
So this is to Lecture Fan, and I guess any of the conservative. But Lecture Fan, you implied that the BLM / Antifa are terrorists, yet you're defending the actions like you are.
I'm
going
not defending. Screw
like,
you,
no,
dude.
Hey, let him finish. Let him finish.
Down.
Let him finish.
Calm the
I never
fuck
once
down.
did that.
Calm the fuck down.
Don't accuse me of bullshit
Calm
like
the
that.
fuck
Oh, wait,
down.
okay, we got it. Okay, you. I promise, Lecture Fan, I'll give you 100% time, as much as you. Well, not as much as you want, but I'll give you time to respond to that. I promise. Prime.
I feel like you're going to bat for these states that broke off from us and killed Americans, right? But BLM or Antifa or whoever, these protesters throwing bottles or whatever, burning down buildings, right? Anything you want to imagine. How is what the Confederacy did like not worse than what BLM did?
Dude,
Your
screw
turn.
you. I don't care what you. I don't care how you feel about what I'm saying. If you can't figure it out and you don't recognize what I'm trying to say, that's your problem, not mine.
I'm so curious. One final question I have. Lecture Fan, would you support like Mexican immigrants that come here flying Mexican flags in public areas?
I don't have any problem with anybody flying any flag. It's called freedom of speech.
Okay, so if you went down to your public courthouse and there were flags of Mexico flying in that courthouse, you'd be totally okay with that. If you are, that's cool. I appreciate
What about
what
about an ISIS
that's not
flag?
the debate. That's not the debate.
It absolutely
though.
is the debate.
No, I think that we should fly the American flag, which is where we've only flown the American flag everywhere in this country for the last 150 years.
That's not true. That's part of the debate. Is that some of these like Confederate monuments or flags even have been flown in public areas?
They've never been flown above the American flag. And if they are, then I disagree with it. I disagree with flying any.
That's good. Okay, cool. Right.
Any flag, and more importantly, any flag that's flown above the American flag, I'm opposed to it. I think the American flag should be the only flag that we fly. But if Mexicans come here and they want to fly the Mexican flag, I 100% think that's okay. Now, will I say that? Will I advocate for, hey, you're in America. America's a great country. We're one of the most just, fair. We've done more good for this world than any other country. We're the greatest country on earth. You're an American now, or maybe you want to be an American. You should, and try to, convince them that way. Then I absolutely would. And I would be fine if you guys want to try to convince people from the South to not fly the rebel flag. But what I'm opposed to, which is what this entire debate is about, is mobs violently destroying and defacing historical pieces of art. That's what it is. That's what the debate is, because that's what's going on.
Secession was actually absolutely codified in the Constitution and allowed to the point where they're not traitors. You may call them traitors, but the right to secession was 100% legal, and on a states' rights issue, justified if they believe that they had standing reason. Because remember, they go to their local not parliament, but they'll go to their local Congress and they vote on whether they should secede. It doesn't make them a traitor for doing so. You might say morally they're wrong, but calling them a traitor is a misnomer at its very best, and that's being charitable.
The Supreme Court just ruled against us. This is just wrong. You're just wrong. I don't understand.
Yeah, the Constitution.
One of the most American things.
On top of the ruling I cited, where the Supreme Court said no, our Constitution has a supremacy clause that says federal law is supreme over state law, and it's not even unclear. It is quite clear.
But like, do you understand do you understand that when they identify themselves as the sovereign states, then they only put a certain amount of powers within the federal government. They are also encouraged when they believe something to be tyrannical, regardless of what the issue is, they can go up against that force. That's the whole reason as to why America was created. So the secession is American in nature.
I saw. I got. We're running. Don't worry. You have a 1 minute exit time. You can respond to that in your 1 minute exit time. I saw IRI raise his hand a little bit earlier. Did you have something you want to say before we do wrap ups?
Well, I just want to say I partially agree with LTCRfan, surprisingly, on one thing, and that's violently tearing down these statues right now. We are 90 days away from an election. Donald Trump is running on a campaign of restoring law and order, and he would love nothing more than to have video footage of people tearing down these statues so he can run on that. So I'm with you, LTCRfan. Let's not tear them down. Let's deal with it. Each local municipality can start to work it out and talk about the history of it and research, and people can speak up about it. So as of right now, I say let's not tear them down. Let's take them down. I support taking them down, but not in that violent manner.
Cool.
Okay. Now we have outros. You can use your outro for whatever you want on this topic. So if you want to respond to someone else, you will have the ability to. The last time, again, you'll be able to address this topic is the intro to the next topic, because somebody might say something that you won't get to respond to here. Okay, we're going to start with the doghouse in the upright corner, and I'm going to go use the bathroom again, so Geek, you got hold of this.
Okay. So, in conclusion, I am all for the citizens deciding on whether or not they want to tear down their particular statue. I don't think it should be done by force, by their own just people coming in from who knows, God knows where, to tear down these statues. I think it should be done by the citizens of that particular community, and depending on the extent of that particular statue, if it is a, if it has some kind of significance, maybe a battlefield or something like that, maybe it has significance to the state, and we can obviously look at that each individually. In terms of whether or not it's about slavery and stuff like that, I think we're specifically looking at Confederate statues, so I will keep it in within scope of here. Like I said, I think it's just up to the people of that particular state. Nothing more, nothing less. Honestly, I'm not saying I'm for these statues. I think there's many statues, and I think we should look at these individually and kind of look at what they're there for. As a matter of fact, I looked at one earlier, and I kid you not, it's a pyramid of cannonballs. Literally, that's a Confederate monument, but it's a pyramid of cannonballs. I don't know about why you would take down a statue of cannonballs, but that's part of one of the things. So I think it's individual. I think we just need to look at it and leave it up to the community to decide what they want to do with it.
All right, Bastiat.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I want to join. I'm really important in saying that I also wouldn't want to see them torn down outside of a democratic process. I believe in private property and public property, and the property should be respected, and that these statues should be taken down in accordance with the democratic process, as was done in my community, right? So I think this is absolutely doable. It's happening right now across the country. I look forward to seeing it, happen further. Beyond that, I really want to push back on this point that it was only 1.4% of people were slaveholders at the beginning of the war. In 1860, this notion that 1.4% of Americans owned slaves. When we talk about that statistic is nonsense, because it also includes all the Americans who lived in the free states. When we talk about Americans in slave states, it went from Delaware, which had 3% of families owning slaves, all the way to Mississippi that had 49%, South Carolina 46%, Georgia 37%. My own Florida, 34%, on and on and on. Slavery was not just some little niche thing. It was ingrained not just into the economy of the South, but unlike the North, into the society, into the culture, into the everyday experience of the South, which attempted to break away to defend that system that the people who founded the Confederacy proudly referred to as their peculiar institution. This notion that it can be minimized, that's just not true. It was part and parcel of the Confederate experience, along with also taking up arms to attack Americans. And it's important to remember that it wasn't the Union that fired first, it was the Confederacy that fired first in the attack on Fort Sumter. The Confederate States of America initiated the war, and just like America often has, America ended the war. All right. So it's honestly like arguing for a monument to kamikaze soldiers. All right. Yeah, they were brave too. They also fought for a cause against this country and shouldn't be honored by it.
Okay. Next is going to be Suspect Sushi.
Yeah, I've already talked about that. So I'm just going to talk about secession, right? So the fact that it was ratified in our Constitution, but I'm going to get more into it, right? So I'm just going to say this is a excerpt from what's his first name? Something Kaiser. I forget his name, but basically he says there has to be a specific constitutional prohibition of secession for it to be illegal. Conversely, there did not have to be a specific constitutional affirmation of the right for secession for it to be legal. Why? Because of the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which states the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. This amendment states nothing new, but is merely a restatement, as the preamble to the Bill of Rights explains. It is a restatement of the fact that the federal government can govern only as to express, and that is made clear also in the preamble, powers granted or delegated to it by the Constitution. Articles 1 through 3 and states are prohibited from doing certain things only if it states so expressly therein. The power to prevent secession is not granted to the federal government, and the right to secede is not prohibited to the states under our Constitution. So when they seceded, they were not they were seceded against what they view to be a tyrannical government or someone who is infringing on their rights, regardless of whether it's due to like the taxation, regardless if it's due to slavery, regardless of they farted too hard and now they're angry at the North. It doesn't matter. Their rights to secede, if they vote on it, is constitutionally allowed, and it does not make them traitors in the eyes of the U.S. government. Plain and simple.
Okay, next is gonna be Destiny. Destiny, it's you.
Oh yeah, I don't really care much about the statue thing. I think if communities want to take them down, they can. I think that's totally fine. I think it's really weird that people like fetishize or obsess over having like Confederate statues up, considering that they argue all the time that like the Confederacy was Democrats and it was all Democrats that were the slave owners and all Democrats that were the breaking away in the South. But then it seems like Republicans are the ones that are the most eager to defend those statues. It seems a little bit strange. I don't know why they do that. I don't know where this weird. I feel like I'm debating all writers again, where I'm hearing all this weird talk about how like, oh, well, actually nobody owned slaves. And actually the Civil War wasn't actually about slavery at all. And actually it's totally legal to secede secede from the Union. I don't know, like I don't know where we're reading this from. I didn't catch the last source, but I mean, in Texas v. White, like that Supreme Court case over the Confederate bonds, like the Supreme Court says that you're not allowed to unilaterally secede from the Union. You can't do it. You're not allowed. That's the Supreme Court stance on it. I don't know what legal blog or whatever or random person thinks that you can interpret some document. I mean, I've heard a lot of sovereign citizens running around screaming at cops that they're like allowed to travel for free and not be touched by anybody. I don't know if this is like the same type of tier of argument, but yeah, you're not allowed to secede from the United States. The Supreme Court and therefore the United States Constitution doesn't recognize that as a right that a state has. And yeah, but back to the original point, I don't really care much about statues, but if people want to get rid of them, then Godspeed.
Okay, next I'm going to be throwing it over to Last Username.
Okay, so the obvious solution to this, as I said before, is just to not have any public statues. It's been suggested, so the democratic approach doesn't really work because, the people who didn't vote for the statue are going to be pissed off. And all the usual excuses for why you need a centralized government to make decisions democratically, none of those really apply to statues. I don't see any reason why you couldn't just have statues be entirely private and paid for by the people who want them. Then the people who don't want them don't pay for them, and they have nothing to complain about. As for beautifying public buildings, there's lots of ways to do that that aren't controversial. You can put art that doesn't honor any particular people or whatever in history. That's you don't need to put statues of people up. Just put some art or something, or put the lady with the scales and the blindfold in your courthouses. That's fine. So yeah, that's like, it seems like the whole idea of public statue is just a recipe for arguments and controversy and people getting angry and knocking them down. Like let's just get rid of all of them.
Okay, next is going to be IRI.
Sure. So I'm just going to keep harping on this point of why these specific set of statues were erected. I encourage people to Google Lost Cause and see it is an attempt to rewrite history here for the South. And if you start looking into some of these statues, there's some real egregious ones out there, specifically one that I looked up, and I appreciate Dylan bringing me on here because it gave me a chance to really look into this issue. There's one in Arlington National Cemetery, which is hallowed ground, and it is a Confederate memorial, and there's a soldier from the South who's handing his baby to a mammy, believe it or not, and it depicts this older black woman in just the worst fashion possible, and it sort of whitewashes the whole idea of slavery, that, oh, look at this, these people got along and it was kind of it was okay and it wasn't as bad as you can imagine. I can only imagine the psychological terror and any slave lived under, that there was never a great moment. And then, believe it or not, there's actually a black man enslaved depicted on there as well. So I couldn't imagine if I was a black American and I went to Arlington National Cemetery and I saw someone who looks like me depicted in such terrible conditions. I mean, that is just heartbreaking. And we shouldn't memorialize stuff like that. We should remember the Confederacy, but we shouldn't revere it.
Next is going to be Prime.
I'm closer to last username on all this. I agree with him on that. That the whole statue thing is weird. Like it's weird that we worship these figures. But if we're going to have them, then and I think there's a bit of a consensus forming that that they should be looked at democratically, thought of critically, to see if they still represent our values. And so then we can decide if we still want them up. So I think also it's not the biggest of deals. But if any statue is going to be taken down, yes, let's make that the Confederate statues. They're traitors, and we shouldn't be celebrating them at all.
Okay, and finally, LTCRfan.
Yeah, I just think this cancel culture and destructive nature of the far left is really not healthy and not productive. And I appreciate a lot of people on here saying they disagree with the anti-democratic, violent, sort of illegal destruction of these statues. But that's the reality of what's going on. That's really what is going on in the United States. And everybody here defending the tearing down of these statues is providing cover for sort of that illegal, destructive nature. I think people should focus on building things, being productive, doing positive things for society instead of just cancel culture and let's go around and tear down everything that we find offensive. Whether it's abolishing police or tearing down all of our statues, it's all cancel culture. It's all this like super woke. If it's not perfect and if it's not like exactly how I believe, then we need to tear it down. And if you're going to go and tear down everything that offends anybody, or you're going to go tear down anything that has any portion of it could be viewed negatively, you're going to end up destroying everything. I think people should try to focus on building things instead of destroying things. And the far left with their violence and the radical cancel culture destruction, and it should be fought back against very, very hard, which is why I'm so happy. If you guys don't know, President Trump signed an executive order to create the National Garden of American Heroes. We should be getting proposed plans in September to fulfill the executive order. We need to be building more statues, which is why I'm so happy for the National Garden of American Heroes. I cannot wait to see all the new statues in classical art form of the American heroes throughout our history, all the way back to Columbus, all the way through to more modern day heroes. And so plug for the National Garden of American Heroes. Let's do it.
Okay, I think now we're going to be going on to the next and final topic.
Real quick, before we start the final topic, I just wanted to thank everyone who's here right now, whether it's our panelists or the viewers. I think I can speak for Dylan to say that we appreciate everyone being here. And also, I wanted to add that creating a panel like this takes time. It takes a lot of energy. So if you want to see more Hippy Dippy podcast every Friday, 8 p.m. EST, feel free to basically please support the channel, follow, subscribe, and everything. And yeah, don't forget to check out the YouTube channel as well. Awesome thumbnails.
Okay, thank you. For people asking who that is my co-moderator in chat. He is Mr. Geek. He really helps me out. And Puppy Puncher, thank you for the 5 gift subs. Okay, next and final topic. Should people be mandated to wear masks? Let me repeat it one more time so it's extremely clear. Should people be mandated to wear masks? And when I mean mandated, I do mean by law. You can take this wherever you want. Obviously, it's a very diverse topic. You can talk about, well, social pressure. There's a lot of places you can take this. And I'm going to start off with IRI.
Sure. So I would say yes in general. I believe in the state of Texas, you can get a $250 fine if you don't wear a mask within public, indoors in a public space. And I'll also side with our 45th president of the United States, Donald John Trump, who said it's patriotic to wear a mask. So I don't see what the big problem is with wearing a mask. And I think we can just put a law on the books for all the people who aren't going to go out and who aren't going to follow it voluntarily and need a little reminder.
Okay, next is going to be Destiny.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a mask order seems to be pretty important right now in terms of public safety. Same way that I would support like mandatory vaccinations, or at the very least to get into like public schools and stuff. I'd support a mandatory mask order. It's pretty embarrassing where we're at right now in the United States. I wish I could say more on this, but it's really that simple. Like we should have a mandatory mask order. Jesus Christ.
Okay, next is going to be LTCRfan.
I'm 100% opposed to a mandatory mask. What a fundamental violation of our basic freedoms and liberties. It's just so sad to see American citizens being in favor of such a grotesque violation of our civil liberties. Whatever happened to my body, my choice? I guess you guys are just fine with the government telling you what to do with your body, huh? That's just horrible that people would be in favor of such severe violations of liberty, with no discussion of the efficacy of them or the method of how they're passed, whether the people ever get a say in any of this, problems of how to enforce it. I think a $250 fine and certainly a $1,000 fine is a clear violation of the excessive fines clause of the 8th Amendment. There's a lot of downsides to masks, including there's been studies that show there's a significant increase in headaches and lots of other problems with the mask. My personal viewpoint on what I've personally seen people doing, constantly fidgeting, their masks the masks get wet and moisturized, and then they set them down, and then they pick them back up and put them back on. These are just breeding grounds of disgusting bacteria and viruses themselves. They're uncomfortable to wear. They're very, very, very questionable effectiveness, and we can talk about the studies on effectiveness. But with significant downsides to mask wearing, with a huge violation of our liberties, with very questionable effectiveness, and people being in favor of mandating it, it's blatantly political for 2020. All the Democrats want everybody to be mandated to wear masks for 2020 to try to drive down the right track, wrong track poll numbers, which are supposed to hurt Trump. It's a blatant anti-Trump political movement. I'm 100% opposed to mask mandates. I think they're garbage.
Okay, next is going to be Last Username.
So I in the past, I've actually supported making masks legally required. But I think it makes more sense to just leave it up to business owners and private property owners what to set their own policy about masks. If the business doesn't want to let you in without wearing a mask, then that's in their right to do. And as for government property, if you have to go into a government building or something, I'm perfectly fine with the government saying you need masks in this building. Because I don't see how else you would decide that. But I don't think there's a need for the government to require everyone to wear a mask, even on private property. I think that you leave that up to the business and leave that up to the market forces, which will probably influence people to make masks mandatory. If anybody's sort of having trouble with the idea, feels like it's an imposition on their freedom to be forced to wear a mask. I mean, you are forced to wear a lot of other stuff, like pants, all the time. Do you consider that an imposition on your liberty? I mean, maybe you do. I know some people definitely do. But it's not something that, seems to outrage people most of the time. And yet there seems to be more justification for wearing a mask. I mean, not wearing pants is generally not going to kill people, around you, except for some people, but not wearing a mask might. So, think of it that way. So it's not that crazy, the idea of being required to wear a mask, whether that's done by the government or private property owners, either way.
Okay, next is going to be Bastiat.
Yeah, last username with the blessed point on clothes is absolutely true. I mean, it is the same principle, except that the public health justification is much clearer with a contagious disease. So I hope LTCRfan heard that it's literally no different than requiring people to wear clothes in public. But beyond that, I know you really, LTCRfan, you mentioned my body, my choice. Look, the reason my body, my choice is such a hollow argument to conservatives and people who are against abortion is because they recognize that it isn't just your body. It isn't just your choice. There's another person involved. But unlike abortion, where there's some question as to whether another person is involved between reasonable people, there is no question that other people are involved. Other persons are involved when you choose not to wear a mask in public. Nobody has a right to be a disease incubator. And frankly, I think it goes further than just saying the business should decide. No business has the right to decide that its customers can be disease incubators. The Supreme Court said in 1905, Jacobson v. Massachusetts, you can have mandatory vaccination. You can certainly constitutionally have these mask requirements. That case was used to justify those too. Ultimately, the people do get a say. They get a say through their elected representatives who pass these mask orders. At the end of the day, it has nothing to do with Trump because as the great Diamond Joe Biden has showed, the only thing he needs to do, the only thing Biden and the Democrats need to do to win this election is to let Trump just go on and dig his own grave.
Okay, next is Suspect Sushi.
No, I like to keep it to the state level and also the private business owners. If you say, hey, if you don't wear a mask, you're out of here. That's basically all I really want. I don't like increasing the size of our federal government anymore. I actually want a smaller government. So, and giving more and more powers to them is something that I am not a fan of. Also, I just have a quick question for everybody. Is should we make all public health recommendations federally mandated, including social distancing and crowds? Because if so, we have an issue with the BLM protests.
Okay, next
also, by the way, Destiny, every time you've asked me for a citation, I have added you and sent those to you. I don't know if you ever looked at them, though.
Doghouse, it's it's your turn.
Sure. So I don't believe in just making orders or frivolous laws just to make laws. Should people wear masks? Absolutely. I think that there's definitely some things to be there. But when we look at different polls, we see that in April, 68% responded to an AP poll saying that they wear masks. In May, 73% of people said that they would wear masks. And in July, it rose all the way up to 86%. So we saw an ever-increasing poll where people saying they were wearing masks on top of other things like washing hands more frequently. And the other thing, too, about all this as well is that the complexity, there's fines. And it's really rich to me that those people who were so against police violence are advocating for a larger police state with an actual law. Order a little bit different, right? But a law now you actually have the sheriffs and stuff who actually have to enforce that law. So it's really interesting to me too how you'd be, advocating for a larger police state with this law. Now, again, I think that should people wear masks? Sure, but if we look at list companies as well, there's been many companies that have actually come out and said, "Hey, we're going to be implementing these mask orders." Just for an example, we had Apple, AT&T, Circle K, Costco, all these different stores. Again, I have no problem with those stores if they want to implement their, mask. I think that's their, that's their store, that's their policy. I think that, again, the private market right now with these stores can handle it. I think that people understand that they need to wear masks. And according to these polls, people are wearing masks at an increasing rate too, mind you. So again, I don't see it being a necessity at this point in time. And I don't believe in just making laws just to make laws because we perceive it to be one way when it's really not that way.
Okay, next is going to be Prime.
Hi. So LTCRfan doesn't seem to understand that these masks aren't in place to protect you. It's to protect other people from the germs that you may have. That is the point of the mask. So when you say my body, my choice, clearly you're not understanding the purpose of the mask in the first place. So I actually, I guess maybe a bit more of a nuanced point on this. I guess agree a bit of what last year's name and Doghouse were saying. You were saying that we should leave it up to businesses, and private property owners to decide on these things. I'd be all for that, especially with Doghouse point on the on not creating a larger police state. I'd be all for that, but people have proven themselves not intelligent enough to get with the program. Like if it was the case that the vast majority of Americans were on board, then yeah, let's please not increase the police state. Please not increase police contact with individuals that could turn violent. Instead, which we've seen before in New York. Instead, I'd love it if people did this voluntarily. Like for instance, in Japan, where they don't have to mandate these things because this is a well-known cultural thing to simply wear a mask, but we're not doing that here in the States. And the problem is, and we leave it up to just business owners. There are going to be customers who are going to be crazy belligerent, as we've seen in plenty of videos, right? And we're going to fight them tooth and nail on this. Like, I wish we didn't have to do it, but apparently we have to treat these people like children and require them to wear a mask. But it is what it is.
Okay, now did I miss anybody? I think I might have. No? Okay, great. The floor is open. If anybody said anything you disagree with, you can engage with them freely. Please be as cordial as possible.
Fuck this
Prime,
country, okay? Listen, okay? I am a wealthy white man. I'm not supposed to be impacted by dumb shit that our government does. That's supposed to be for minorities and LGBT people. We have fucked the coronavirus shit up so fucking hard, it has even fucked my life up. So you know that shit has gotten so way, way, way beyond where the fuck it ever should have been, all right? There might have been some point in time where we could have done social distancing and we could have had the fucking mask should be optional, but clearly as Americans, we were not fucking ready for that shit, okay? Our stats right now on this coronavirus shit are fucking abhorrent. It is embarrassing. It is so fucking bad, I can't even go to some U.S. fucking states because they don't want people from certain states going there unless the CDC has approved them because there are so many fucking infections, okay? Unfortunately, like, I would rather be alive with some of my rights restricted than in some burning, like, melted piece of shit country where everybody is dying from this stupid fucking disease because people can't manage their public health. Fuck it. Like, like masks, they just have to be a thing because we've clearly shown that we can't manage this disease otherwise.
Okay, Destiny, you've been watching way too much CNN right now.
What did I just say that had to do with CNN?
Wait,
Can you tell me?
let's let him finish.
It's just
sorry.
that's just 100% the mainstream narrative that's being pushed by mainstream media that's completely off base. And I like the fact that Prime brought up Japan because if you actually look, Japan is having one of the most severe second waves of any country in the world. Go look at Japan's epidemiological curve right now. And so if you really want to talk about how the U.S. is so horrible because we're not wearing masks, well, how is Japan having one of the worst second waves ever when you guys admit that Japan, everybody wears masks? So there's a lot of questions around the effectiveness of it. The mask only impacts other people if the other people are near you. And if you're so scared of the virus, you can stay at home. You don't get to force other people to wear a mask when they go out in public just because you're scared of the virus. You don't have to go out in public. You can stay at home. So if you're so scared of the virus and the mask is to protect other people, you can stay at home. But to try to force everybody else to go through this very questionable, highly intrusive, uncomfortable thing just because you're concerned about the virus, I think is totally unacceptable. Moreover, nothing
What's
was
your fan? Do you think
Oh,
people are
that's-
responsible?
It's
so
pretty directly
complicated. I'm
Destiny.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, go.
Destiny, I was giving it to you. Destiny.
And
Okay.
Japan was going on.
Japan having a severe second wave. Japan has had 1,000 fucking deaths. The daily new cases for Japan are not at our daily new deaths for the United States. Yesterday, Japan had 1,300 new cases. We had almost 1,500 people die. And we are 3 times the population of Japan. The numbers do not match. Don't sit here and tell me that a country that's had less than 35,000 cases of coronavirus is somehow having some severe second wave that's at all comparable to the massive second wave of death that we've seen sweeping through states that are coincidentally Republican and coincidentally not taking things like social distancing or mask orders into effect. There's
No,
no
so
part
what
of
wait,
CNN,
wait,
I'm sorry,
so-
no amount of liberal bias, lamestream media can excuse or explain how absolutely abhorrent the coronavirus shit is right now in the United States and America. And I don't know if I would trust a single thing you would say after suggesting to me that a country that has like 1/3 our population and 1/100th our diagnosed cases is having a severe second wave that's anywhere near the order of what we have right now. What an absurd notion. How fucking dishonest.
Wait, do you believe these mandatory mask orders would actually like have prevented those 1,000 deaths? Do you believe that those mandatory mask orders particularly would have stopped those?
As far as I'm aware, the one study that I've seen on this said that if we would have started mask and social distancing orders 3 weeks earlier, we would have saved ourselves on 30,000 deaths. Do you have reason to believe that masks wouldn't help us?
Well, no, what I'm saying here is I'm saying that if we look at how many people have actually worn masks, there's tons of them that are, and that mandatory mask orders do have flaws, such as, for example, taking off your mask when you're at a restaurant. There's also the fact of when you're taking off your mask, according California here, if you're engaged in outdoor work or recreation, such as swimming, walking, hiking, bicycling, or running, when alone or with household members. And then there's been speculation of that. And then, of course, we have different groups. So I don't know if that these mandatory mask orders are without holes. No pun intended.
Your point is basically just now that, okay, well, because it's not perfect, we should do nothing. Because some people are going to take off their masks some of the time, do nothing. I mean, that point is nonsensical. The point is
my point before was, as I stated, is that we've had increased usage of masks on top of other measures. And I don't understand why all of a sudden, go back to what Prime said, even when that nobody's wearing these masks. Apparently people are wearing these masks, and that how can we conclude then that these people that are getting sick aren't getting sick by other means of these holes in these particular measurements? In other words, someone's at a restaurant, takes off their mask to eat, and then somebody gets sick, and then they take it home to their family.
Well,
it spreads very quickly,
It's
doesn't it?
like saying that somebody in a car crash that dies with their seatbelt on. Well, fuck. If seatbelts aren't protecting people from 100% of fatal accidents, then we might as well not wear seatbelts. Masks are only one part of the equation. It's got to be like a whole comprehensive societal issue. Whether that includes social distancing, whether that includes washing our hands more, whether that includes wearing masks. Like, it's all part of the thing. Like, it's not like we can just do one thing to solve this problem.
Yes. And 88% of people said on July that they were washing their hands more frequently. And then 86% said they were wearing a mask when leaving the home.
When they go in public.
So
86% said they were wearing a mask when they were leaving the home.
And if we get that number up higher, we save more lives.
I think, but it was going up before masks. Before masks.
Okay. Prime, you wanted to say something? Then I think LTCRfan wanted to respond to something earlier.
Sure. I'm just curious, Doghouse, and
sure.
Others seem to feel differently about this, but how do you feel about this? Do you think masks can be effective to stop the spread? I mean, I think maybe you mentioned like people lifting them up during like eating at a restaurant, right? So that would be when they're less effective. But do you think they're effective at all? Right, having a mask on, is that?
As I said earlier, should you wear a mask? Sure. Should it be mandated? No, because of the fact that I've seen how the increase of usage before mandatory mask orders are going up. I don't see the need to implement a law for people to wear masks when people are already increasing their usage of masks, and they're still doing other measures like avoiding washing their hands more frequently, avoiding large groups. 85% are saying they're staying away from large groups. Like, we're seeing an ever increasing amount of people that are doing these measures. So I don't see why you would need a mandatory mask order to draw out more people when there was already an increase in the trend. I don't understand why a mask order would all of a sudden, of course it's going to increase it in because people are mandatory, sure. But you already see people doing it before the mandatory mask order, no? So like, how can you say the trend would keep going faster?
I'll just finish this point, and then I love for everyone to jump in. The problem is that on the right, it's become not all the right, but many on the right, it's become a cultural thing to go against wearing masks. Right? Again,
by what measure? By what measure do you have? Is this an anecdote, or is there any kind of poll or something?
By Trump and Pence not wearing masks. Sorry.
But see, this is something else I take a great.
Okay, well, you gotta let him answer. You gotta let him answer, dog.
You can look at Trump's own rally, right? Trump's rally where it was at a convention center, and Trump had them take off these social distancing stickers, right? They wanted people to pack in. They discouraged them from wearing a mask. Herman Cain was at that Trump rally. Herman Cain is dead. I'm saying it's become a cultural thing. I wish it wasn't. I wish it wasn't the case. I wish we could just rely on people to do this.
Is this a small? So let me ask you this: do you believe then that having a mandatory mask law that those people that were at that rally would actually wear the mask? Do you believe, because what you're saying here sounds like you're saying if there was a mandatory mask order, that those same people that were at the rally would wear those masks? And I don't know what you would use to come to that conclusion.
Well,
other than it's a mandatory mask.
Conservatives love law and order, so I'm assuming that they would follow the law. I mean, they certainly wouldn't break the law. I don't think so, right?
Doghouse, is your point that if you pass a law, people like more than 0 people will not follow it?
Like, no, but what I'm saying here is, and I'll make it again. I'll make my point.
Okay, one at a time.
I'll make my point once again. There was already increased usage of people wearing masks before the mandatory mask orders. I do not believe, for example, the seatbelt law, right? 24% in Michigan before the state adopted a mandatory seatbelt law in 1985. Then when they implemented it climbed to a whopping 66.1%. So again, I'm going back to at what point then is
I mean, you're asking me, okay, so then are you saying that like 0.01? Well, I'm asking you too then. Like at what point then like are we saying that okay, that's enough people that we can conclusively say that they are wearing masks, right?
At what point do we your question is at what point do we implement a mask mandate rather than a mask recommendation, right? That's your question? When do we do that?
Well, I guess you could say that. I mean, I'm looking right now at the increase of people wearing masks.
Yeah, like I don't know what you're trying to say here. You're saying that when you mandate something, more people do it. I agree. That's why I support a mandate.
More people were doing it before though. More people were already doing it before the law.
Even more people will do it once you make it mandatory.
But if it was already on an upward trend, then the law wouldn't have done shit. It would have already been going up regardless.
Let me tell you why. Because I believe that all lives matter and they should all be protected, even people who don't want to wear masks.
Okay.
Great. I haven't said anything about that.
Okay. You don't have a right to be a disease incubation.
Okay, Bastiat. Okay.
You want me to get this?
Okay. You don't have a right. You don't have a right to go.
All right, here, let me get.
Okay, lecture fan, you wanted to respond.
Yeah. Okay. Destiny is conflating two different things, and I'm sorry it upsets you, Destiny, when I called you out for towing the mainstream media line. But this whole narrative about coronavirus is completely false, and you've totally bought into it. When I said Japan is having a severe second wave, what I meant is if you actually look at the curve, it's Japan's second wave is just as high as its first wave. You're conflating overall numbers of cases, which is highly dependent on testing, and overall number of deaths, which is highly dependent on other health factors. Japan almost has no obesity. Japan almost has no heart disease. Two of those things are some of the highest factors for deaths from coronavirus. Plus, we have totally different ways of testing and numbers of testing and how to categorize deaths and everything like that. So the point about Japan is that if you actually look at the curve, the second curve is just as high, and they have extensive mask wearing. And so for you to then point out overall numbers, pointedly, most of the worst cases have been from Democrat states like New York. The only reason that the Republican states are now having more cases now is because they're currently going through their first wave. There is no second wave. It's the first wave in places that shut down way too early. So you got that totally wrong.
Sydney, you directed at you.
One of the biggest comorbidities for death related to COVID-19, and you should know this because the president that you worship reminds us of this every single time he talks about how important it is to reopen schools, is how old you are. The median age of somebody that dies of COVID-19 is like 75 years old. The median age of a Japanese citizen versus an American one is 10 years older. You're way better off being a little bit overweight and being like 10 years younger than you are being in your fucking 80s. Japan's population is old as fuck. The fact that they don't have more people die, and actually, when you go around any European country and you look at where all the people are dying, where are they dying? Even in the United States, it's in the fucking retirement homes. Like it's in places like in Sweden where you got the old people in the homes. And in Italy, it happened. In the United States, in New York, it happened. Like the idea that somehow like our population is fat and that's the only reason why we're dying of this, and the idea that some states aren't seeing a second wave, when it was really funny because we played this game on stream. You can go and you look at the uptick in cases and you can Google, hey, I wonder when they relaxed all of their regulations. I wonder when they reopened it was like 2 weeks right before. It seems like everybody going out is getting everybody infected again. It's happening in these states. I don't know what part of this is supposed to be fake or what part of this isn't real to you.
I never said anything was fake. I said the narrative that this is all Trump's fault and that the U.S. has been singularly horrible on coronavirus. That's all a big hoax. And I love it that all the leftists and Democrats here all support the mass protests and mass gatherings where you've got thousands of leftists marching in phalanxes screaming at the tops of their lungs. And that's all fine, but that doesn't cause any cases. But oh my gosh, when the place is open, that's what it massively increases.
That's a pivot too. There are 3 separate studies I've seen at this point that point to the fact that there was no increase in contamination in those states when those marches happened. So you got it. So even as a pivot, it wasn't even good as a pivot. But regardless, that's related to the overall point of should we be forced to wear masks? For the public health at this point, probably, since it seems like we can't get through things otherwise. Like everybody in here, I think, acknowledges that wearing masks is beneficial. I don't know why some people are.
Okay, let me ask you this then.
Flu vaccines are only like 50% effective. That doesn't mean we say don't get them.
Okay, let me ask you this then. Why is Japan going through a second wave if they have universal mask wearing?
I don't know about Japan. care about Japan, but it's possible they might be going through a second wave because they're doing other things that are unsafe. I'm not saying that wearing a mask should be the singular way that the United States combats this virus. I don't know what Japan is doing. I don't even know if they had enough cases for it to be considered a first or second wave in the first place. I know that the number of cases that Japan has is incredibly low, and if wearing a mask gets us a smaller second wave with 1/100th the amount of infections, I'm okay with that. Also, the pivot to the idea that we're just like testing too much is also uniquely bullshit. I don't know why Trump is saying that either. Cases have risen even in places where testing has remained the same. It's not true.
Couple of quick points on Japan. One, Japanese people are so successful in containing the first wave that a lot of people stopped wearing masks. Number two, Japan has a whole lot of American military bases.
Oh, was it in Okinawa, that one? Sorry, where all the American military people were?
You're allowed to respond. Just okay, Prime.
So I believe it was LTCRfan that said previously that if you're so afraid of this virus, then instead you could just stay home. Well, let's not forget that this virus isn't killing people in equal measure, right? Among demographics. A lot of working class people, a lot of African Americans, a lot of minorities in general are the ones being hurt by this because they don't have the option of staying home. The people who are low income have to go out. They're not fucking Twitch streamers, right? They have to go out there and have physical contact with each other. So if other people are being irresponsible and not wearing masks, right, and helping to spread this virus, so then they are going to get hurt. And furthermore, they're not getting support from the federal government to keep people home. So it'd be great. We could keep a lot more of those people home if they were getting support, financial support, to stay home. But we're not. That's not happening. So it's not simply an option. Just like, oh, if you're afraid, then stay home. If you're vulnerable because you have some autoimmune disease or something else, right, stay home. Not everyone has that option. I wish they did, but they don't.
Okay, let me address Destiny's point about even if you account for increased testing, there's been an increase in case. I agree. Here's the thing. Everybody knew that we were going to have an increase in cases. If you guys understand epidemiology, you know that the only point of community mitigation is to flatten the curve so we don't overwhelm our health systems. Everybody knew that reopening is going to cause a slight increase in cases. That is not a problem. That's not an issue. As long as it doesn't overwhelm the health system, that's okay, because you know what? The economic shutdowns have killed millions of people. There's been UN estimates that there's going to be millions of children dead across the world because of the economic collapse that these Democrat leftist shutdowns have run. And so it doesn't matter if there's a small increase in cases after we opened up. Everybody knew that was happening. The entire point was to reduce the curve so we didn't overwhelm our health systems. And on that metric, we've had a wild success in the United States. Not a single person in this country needed healthcare treatment and didn't get it. Not a single person needed a ventilator and didn't get it. We flattened the curve, a complete success. Our healthcare systems were never overwhelmed. And moreover, I would like to know, what's the purpose of a mask? Is it a part of a mitigation option so we don't overwhelm our healthcare systems? Because if that's the purpose, we don't need them. Our hospitals are nowhere close to being overwhelmed.
I never thought we were going to have death panels in the United States when people complained about Obamacare, but we did. We just got them under Republicans. What you're saying is just not true. Texas literally is not accepting in some hospitals transfer patients and is having to make the decision of who gets a ventilator and who gets sent home to fucking die. The idea that we have 100% had the medical tools necessary to deal with some of these people right now is just not true. You can look it up right now in local or national publications that are talking about hospitals in Texas having issues getting all the treatment that they need for the people that are coming in with these diseases. The idea that the only thing we're trying to do is to just flatten the curve, that's not necessarily true either. It would also be nice to just not be infected. We still don't know what the long-term ramifications of this disease are. There are people that months later are having lung problems or lung scarring, or people that are being reported as having neurological damage. We don't know what the long long-term implication of this is. It's probably better not to infect 90% of the population before we figure the answers out there.
Okay, I got it. No. I'm talking. No. Okay, I'm gonna throw it to last username and IRI because both of you haven't talked that much, and last username had his hand up.
We're trying. And
I understand. I'm throwing it over. I'm throwing it over right now. Last username.
I'd also like to ask LTCRfan. I know you fly the Gadsden flag on your stream. Do you consider it, which is the kind of libertarian flag, do you consider it an act of aggression to infect someone else with the disease?
If you knowingly do it, absolutely, yeah.
Okay,
and
so
that's a crime. That's a crime.
So you can't be 100% certain.
unless you're in a Democrat city like California where they've just decriminalized transferring HIV.
Right.
But yes, if you and quarantines of sick people, I'm okay with. What I'm not okay with is mass healthy quarantines and healthy mask mandates. Remember, you have to be sick for a mask to even work. Healthy mandates don't work.
I want to hear the end of Les Usanim's
realistically,
question.
no one can really be sure that they don't have this. They don't have COVID, and therefore you can't really be sure that you're not. How diligent do you have to be in preventing that possibility that you are giving someone?
Hey, I'm all in favor of level 1 mitigation, and that's what we should have done for coronavirus. Level 1 mitigation under CDC pandemic guidance is if you're sick, stay home. And I agree with that. If you're sick, stay home. I think that's a good idea. Going to a mask mandate is preposterous at this point. And
the people who don't know they're sick can do no wrong by spreading the disease. According to you.
No, I don't. Yeah, if you don't know you're sick and you spread the disease, there's no culpability. All of our criminal laws require intent, and that's for a good reason.
Should you be required to then find out if you're sick? I mean,
no, absolutely not. You know what you should do is if you're so concerned about it, you should stay home. Nobody's forcing you to go out.
That's
okay. I gotta give it to Ira. He hasn't spoken once. And then Suspect, you'll be next. He hasn't spoken once either.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's dispel this notion that the protest helped spread it. This was outside. Most people complied with wearing masks. Again, as somebody who went out to the protest, probably one of the only ones here on the panel, I saw for myself, and there was no uptick in cases. So let's dismiss that. Also, wearing masks is step number 1. This is it. This is the easy part. We're going to have to ask people to do contact tracing, take a vaccine twice. And I've talked to LTCRfan already, and he said he's not going to take the vaccine. But guess what? That's not going to be an option. So with a patchwork of rules amongst the state, for example, in Texas, children 10 years and under are exempt. But in Montana, LTCRfan state, children 5 years and under are exempt. So these differences start to confuse people and sow doubt in government. Well, who's right? Who's wrong? And we need people to trust the government 100% on this if we're going to get people to go get injected twice with this vaccine. So I think it's very important that we have a national mandate on wearing masks right now to start building that public trust in government.
Suspect Sushi?
Very quick thing. I heard someone say wrong about the California HIV transmission thing. I don't know if pridelegal.com literally that's like literally my source where they quite literally say things now changed since 2018. The bill passes into law, scoring a huge win where it says you will not be criminally charged for transmitting HIV. So just because you're angry at someone, like I don't know what to tell you. Like,
okay, hold on, I have to respond. Okay,
no,
so wait. You've talked so much about shit that you don't know about it, and it's funny because you're looking for like owns or whatever. That's cute, but like, okay, so the law that was specifically changed is so funny because it plays perfectly into what LTCRfan just said about how like you should you be required to find out if you're sick or not. The reason why California changed the HIV law is because HIV was uniquely punished for being transferred from one person to another in ways that other STDs weren't. So what they did was they moved it down from a felony to a misdemeanor so that you would have a similar requirement to be punished as you would with transferring any other STD. The reason why they changed that is because, as LTCRfan also pointed out, intent is also an important part of convicting somebody of a crime. If you never get tested for HIV, well, guess what? You can never be sentenced for transferring it to somebody. The reason why they turned it into a misdemeanor is to make it so that they weren't discouraging people from getting tested, because if you get tested, you have it, and you transfer it to somebody, well, now there's a higher likelihood of you being actually criminally charged with a felony for doing that. So when you say that they made it not a crime, all they did was they brought it in line with other things. Also, as a lawyer, how the fuck can you say that intent is required for any type of crime? That's not true. What about strict liability or statutory crime? If you statutorily rape somebody, it doesn't matter if you know whether or not they're illegal or whether or not they're underage or not. You don't need that. This is literally a whole definition of criminal law is strict liability crime that anybody should know about. I assume you went to law school. I don't know why the fuck you would say that.
Yeah.
Bastiat, you've been wanting to say something for a while?
Just really fast.
Well, there you go.
That speaker brought up the point in half of the states in our great union, if you have sex with somebody and they're a minor, it doesn't matter whether they showed you identification. You are going to prison. So the idea
that you fake identification.
Yeah, it can be fake identification.
They can show you fake ID and you can think they're 21.
No, intent is a factor in some crimes. It is not a factor in other crimes. And for example, speeding, and same with the masks. So
okay,
but like you understand like the difference when they were talking about that when it comes to like the misdemeanor like rate when it comes to other STDs. Like only one STD at least right now ends in like someone's eventual slow painful death, right?
Wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. The expected survival rates and lifespan for HIV is brought in line with the normal population. You lose 10 years off.
Not if you don't have the same resources available to you.
Holy shit! You can have universal health care. I agree with that argument as well, my dude.
Okay, so as of right now, then some people who don't have access to HIV treatment would suffer a slow, painful death.
And guess what? If you get syphilis, you can have a brain infection that'll kill you. If you get gonorrhea or chlamydia, your fucking genitals can fall off depending on how severe.
Those things are easily treatable, and you can get those for a considerably cheaper price than HIV meds.
Considerably cheaper. It doesn't matter if you don't have access to it. If you want to make an argument for access to healthcare, I'm going to agree with you.
I guarantee you'll have easier access. I guarantee that a poor person will have easier access to a fucking syphilis shot than they would consistent HIV medication.
Possibly. So maybe we should make it so that people that have HIV aren't discouraged from getting testing so that they can know if they have it so that they don't transfer it to other people. I agree with California's law as well. Thank you.
Well, I think people who are just running around fucking willy-nilly without getting STD tests are basically pretty shitty. So
wow, kind of like people that run around willy-nilly without using masks or doing other things to find out if they're infected, because a lot of the people that transfer COVID-19 are asymptomatic. I agree with you as well there.
Remember, I said that I don't think a federal mandate should be done, but I do think that if state legislation says that you'll fucking get a $500 fine or whatever for it, that's perfectly fine. I wear a mask, but I mean only when it's mandated. I don't wear one in the car and shit.
Hey, Prime, you've been wanting to talk for a while. I'm throwing it over to you.
Okay, yeah, I'm confused about what Suspect Sushi wants. Like, it only matters if it's not federally mandated, right? You're fine with 50 states having 50 different mandates. Is that okay?
What I'm saying is this: if your state does not have a mask mandate in any capacity, can't fucking get salty because someone's not wearing a mask. If there is one, and then there's like restitution in the form of fines, like levied against you because you're breaking their like state laws, then that's what you're dealing with. I don't think a federal needs to be involved in this decision.
Okay, all right. But I want to also respond to something Lecture Fan said quite a while ago, saying that our healthcare system has been completely up to the task when that has not been the case. We've seen that in New York, where hospitals have closed, usually in low-income areas, right? We can see that there have been more deaths in those areas. People of low income, they've been found in their homes dead. Right. And we've been suspecting those are COVID-19 deaths because our for-profit system does not allow for these people to get the care that they need. So many of them will literally just die at home rather than step into a hospital. So the scope of this tragedy, we still have no idea. We're not even close, especially since our testing has been completely inadequate up to this point. So I can't. So I gotta let you know that we may have been overwhelmed, and then of course the death panel things. That's the thing that's happening now. I mean, that is us being overwhelmed right this moment. We have to decide that yes, we have to send people home to die.
Yeah, as we speak, in my state, Florida, 50 hospitals already run out of ICU beds, and it's been getting worse for the last 2 weeks.
Lecture Fan, that was directed at you. Do you want to respond to that?
Well, I mean, that's just complete garbage. Anybody that shows up to the emergency room in the United States gets health care. More importantly, our hospitals are supposed to be running at 90% capacity or even closer to 100%. Ideally, hospitals like to be at close to 100% capacity because they need that to make money and to cover their overhead. And so having 90 to 100% capacity is a good thing. What we do in the United States is if you're in a hospital where there's overcapacity, we just send you to the next hospital. We have helicopters and jets, and we'll fly people over to the next hospital. So having close to capacity or even at capacity is actually good. That's what hospitals need to make money. And everybody gets treated when they go to the emergency room. Everybody gets flown to the next hospital if they need to. We've had a resounding success, and more importantly, I still have Destiny said, "Oh, we need to reduce the overall number of infections." that fails the basic epidemiology 101 guidelines, which is reducing the curve does not reduce the overall number of infections. All it does is make it last longer. And so what you're doing is you're actually making it longer until we get herd immunity. And so you're prolonging the pandemic by preventing us from getting herd immunity, which by the way, what we should do is is protect the elderly people and allow the younger healthy people to get herd immunity, which then would make the pandemic go away sooner. And you guys are acting like there's no downside cost to all of these lockdowns, and it's all about just crushing the curve, I guess. But you know what? A lot of people are dying because of the economic collapse that we're having. So if anything, we should be allowing the younger generations to actually get herd immunity so this thing goes away quicker.
Hey, Prime, did you want to respond to that?
Oh, just a little bit, just a few things there. Yes, everyone can get care if they go to the emergency room, right? And everyone can go bankrupt if they don't have insurance, correct? Yes, some people are going to make the choice. Some people are going to make the choice that, yeah, I'd rather die than leave a massive medical bill for my family. Some people are just going to make that choice, right? And herd immunity, first of all, we don't know how long, we're still trying to understand this disease. We don't know how long you are immune afterwards, right? Is it permanently? Is it for a few months or not? We don't know, right? Instead, let's try to study this thing, get a good handle on it before we make some massive policy movement and say, oh, yes, we'll protect the old people. And it's as if the young people don't have contact with old people. We live on two separate tracks in this country. That's not the case. We come in contact with them all the time, right? So this option to have just young people, and young people die from this too. Just like, every sentence you said it was wrong. Like every sentence.
To borrow, today's Milton Friedman's birthday, and to paraphrase a line that he said about current Federal Reserve nominee Judy Shelton in 1994, to describe what LTCRfan said, it would be hard to pack more error into so few words. From this idea, first of all, that everybody gets treatment when they show up the emergency room if the beds are full, to this idea that hospitals want to have 100% capacity because they're all going to be paying customers, even though, as you just said, everybody is to show up to the hospital. From this idea that you can just send them off to new hospitals, as if we have an unlimited supply of hospitals, and continue to offload people from. You're making points against your own points as you go.
Right. Now, as you get off your soapbox, so here's the thing: is Texas is actually on the decline for daily trend, and new daily COVID-19 hospitalizations are actually going down pretty steeply. They went down back in June. And furthermore, the thing with ICUs in Florida, if I remember correctly, there was an issue with how they counted the ICU beds in Florida because the COVID wards were actually in the ICU wards. And so some people that were in the ICU were actually receiving minimal level of care, not intensive level of care, but they're being counted as ICU patients. So there were some issues there with Florida, first and foremost. I don't know if this is happening across the entire country. I hope it's not. That is definitely concerning to me. But in terms of Texas, it's going down in terms of daily hospitalizations. It doesn't look like it's going up. There's no upward trend. It's actually going down pretty drastically.
In response to LTCRfan's comment about young people getting herd immunity, there are lasting effects, LTCRfan, besides death for these young people. They could damage them for life.
That's not known. Most of they call them long-term effects, but even the long-term effects, which are unknown, are expected to go away within a year or two.
The fact that we don't know is all the more reason to avoid it. You don't have a right to conduct some kind of science experiment on the population of this country based on your baseless claim of herd immunity, which, by the way, all the other developed countries in the world haven't had to deal with.
Oh yeah, Sweden's actually doing pretty well. You maybe want to go take.
They're not doing well. Sweden is doing horribly compared to comparable countries in Scandinavia. It's not true.
Well, here's the thing.
Designed, their own head epidemiologist or whatever who designed the Sweden model has regretted it. He's saying that was a mistake. This was a horrible experiment that went wrong, and instead he would have done it completely differently if he had known better.
Well, I highly doubt that because I've seen a lot of other.
In this country, I mean, LTCRfan, you kept talking about how this is the greatest country in the world. I happen to agree. At least, maybe before this COVID stuff, I was pretty avid defender of that. But at the end of the day, we shouldn't aspire to just kind of languish where we are. We should aspire to do better. We shouldn't just say, well, let's just settle for what we got because of herd immunity. No, other countries have taken the initiative and done better. South Korea never faced any of this. South Korea, which, by the way, only a few short decades ago was still a developing country, has controlled the infection for the most part, and now they're putting us to shame. Meanwhile, our country, which has been ahead of the pack and just about everything for 2 centuries, is just fumbling and failing at a disease that is entirely within its control.
Our population is vastly larger, though.
That
That's a
doesn't
lot more
matter.
people to fucking
Wait,
corral.
no, that is
Okay,
not.
okay, everybody. Okay.
Fucking corral.
One
That is a lot more people to corral.
at a time.
South Korea has a much higher population density than the United States, and we had the exact same date for our first confirmed case.
Widespread population is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
And
so
we-
we should be doing better. That should help us. Having a more spread population should make it harder. Also, somebody in here cited the fact that the hospitalization rates were falling dramatically for this. Where the fuck are you getting that information from? I just downloaded this from
Texas TMC, Texas Medical
Yep,
Center.
I downloaded the whole spreadsheet right now from the Health and Human Services.
Sure.
So it looks like we're down to 9,300 hospitalizations a day, down from 10,400. Like, we're on a massive uptick for this month. What are you talking about? Last month they were at
Here, I can send this
1,600.
over to you. I could send this over to you. I'm looking right at it. It says TMC daily new COVID-19 hospitalizations, ICU and med-surg hospitalizations. And the last date was July 30th.
Let me
I can
ask.
send this to
Wait,
you.
what is your number for July 30th? What do you have? Because statewide, I downloaded a spreadsheet from the site. Statewide, it's 9,296 cases.
I have
Well,
209.
point
but I
is
don't know
it's
if that's
going
by
down.
thousands or something. I'm trying to
They
look at
go-
what it's saying here.
It goes in a curve. It's called an epidemiological curve for a reason. So if it's already peaked out and it's going down, and you even using your own numbers, Destiny, it's on the down slope, which means it's already going down. So it'll go down just like every single other country, every single other state. Once the curve goes up, and then it comes down. That's how it works.
The problem is that
Hold on.
I'll
Here's
let
the
your
thing.
friend
The one thing I agree with all of the leftists on here is that there's a lot of unknowns about this virus, and I agree with
I'll
that.
look it up.
We don't know 100% how much, whether it's aerosolized and how much spread occurs from aerosolized. We don't know what the herd immunity threshold is. We don't know how severe the long-term effects are. We don't know a lot of these different things, but what we do know is basic epidemiology. And you know what? If you guys are so right on your mask thing, and you guys are, it's just so ridiculous to not be in favor of a mask mandate. Well, then why are you having to use the government and the force a lot to force people to do it? Because you know what, you can't succeed in the marketplace of ideas and actually convincing people to do it. So you force it. And I don't want to hear anybody that believes in forcing mask wearing ever talk
The
about.
problem is
freedom
that
and
the
liberty.
marketplace of ideas uses IQ as a currency, and Republican states are severely lacking in that. You talk about how we have a problem right now because there's a second wave, and really it's just the first wave for some states. The problem is that I don't want to be dealing with a fucking third wave 2 months from now because
You
we've
won't.
fooled ourselves. And you know what? You guys also said we wouldn't be dealing with a second wave. Actually, Trump said
Here
we
we
wouldn't even
are.
be dealing with a first wave. Trump
We're
said that
not
this
dealing
was
with
all
the
just-
second wave. We're dealing with
This
the
isn't-
first wave in other states that locked down too early.
No, Mississippi, New
No.
Jersey, Vermont, New York, Pennsylvania, like all of these states were done with their first wave 2 months ago.
They didn't have
Why
a
are we
first
di-
wave. Look, it was so
What do you mean
flat.
they didn't have a first
It was
wave?
so
New York
flat.
didn't have a New York was
New
flat.
York, New
early.
York had a wave, and then now
The,
it's
new,
way
the,
down.
the entire
states-
Northeast was flat. Like
No,
you're just making, you're
no, the
literally just
Northeast-
pulling
no,
shit out of thin
that's
air.
not. There's no second wave in the Northeast. There's no second wave in New York.
Thank
New
you,
York
man.
is low.
But that's because they actually are like mandating mask wearing, mandating social
it's not.
distancing, and mandating the closure of businesses. Also,
No,
this
it's
idea, somebody mentioned earlier, the difference between having state mandates versus federal mandates, and maybe it'd be better if every state did it. This has been one of the chief failures of the United States from the beginning of this entire pandemic. The problem is we do not have a unified federal response, and it's left every single state scratching its head, sitting there to fight on a political battleground for whether or not they need to protect its citizens. Right now, like even when we were closing schools, nobody knew because we had no direction from the federal government. Should we remain open? Should we close? Nobody knew what an essential job was. Nobody knew what the direct orders should have been from the White House. Everybody was left to figure out on their own how they should be protecting against this. And unfortunately,
talking about
There's a good
reopening?
reason.
Finish.
There's a good reason for
Are you
that.
talking about
No,
reopening?
we are so integrated as a country that it's kind of silly to say that one state should have a completely separate policy from another when
We
it
should
comes
have
to
county
public
by
health.
county. We should have
It
county
doesn't
by
make
wasn't
county
sense
policy.
because everybody around
Destiny,
you could be
wasn't-
One
protected.
at a time. One at a
But
time.
Destiny, hold on, Destiny, were you talking about like going back to like April and May when we started to reopen? Is that what you're specifically talking about, or are you talking about currently right this very minute? Because opening, there was a bulletin that was put out from the White House and the CDC that was reopening guidelines, and it was a phased opening, I believe 3 phases. And one of those, there was a gate, I guess you can call it, before they were even able to get into that first particular phase.
Sure,
I mean, there
they
was
did,
that
they
particular.
did post that, sure, but the closures were done wholly inconsistently, and I don't know if no state was mandated to follow those reopening guidelines, and every state was reopening on their own pace.
Yeah,
I wouldn't. I mean, I don't know what the mandate would have done differently necessarily, because I mean, I get that there was like some things that Texas opened up, like there was bowling alleys. That was like first. It was like, wait, what? It was like, what the fuck? That's so weird. But no, like I don't know if mandating like, because each state is different, right? Like I don't know.
Even if
why.
you
Here's
didn't
why
want to
you do
have a federally enforced mandate, which, you know, if you could still have some serious federal guidelines that would have given somebody something to go over. Instead, what we got was a postcard from the Trump administration mailed out to everybody that provide vacuous recommendations, which said nothing, by the way, about wearing masks.
Okay, here's the reason.
It was vapid and weak.
The reason that in fact this should have been done county by county is there's two reasons. Number one, these public mitigation options are very, very, very damaging, extremely harmful. And so you want to do them for the shortest amount of period possible. It's supposed to be 2 weeks. If you're going to do any of these severe level 5 public mitigation options, you're only supposed to do them for 2 weeks, because then very quickly the negatives far outweigh the positives. And so what we should have had is basically like rolling mitigation options, where you wouldn't have had places that are now experiencing the second wave had locked down way too early. And so then they pancaked the curve, and then the virus like slowly circulated in society. And then now we've got months and months and months of these mitigation options, which are doing way more damage than the virus and killing way more people. And so this idea that the United States is a single unit for epidemiological purposes makes no sense. And the public mitigation options are not supposed to just last forever, and the whole point is to not reduce the overall number of cases. Look, that's been known for a long time. Once a virus is circulating, and I'm really important talking about contact tracing and stuff, we're way past that. That's a containment option. We're way past containment. Once you get into mitigate, there's containment and then there's mitigation. Dr. Fauci used to talk about this all the time until he started conflating the two, like we all are now. But initially you do containment, and that's when you do contact tracing. That's before you have community spread. Once you have community spread, you move to mitigation to flatten the curve, to not overwhelm the healthcare system. This idea that you're going to reduce the overall number of cases once you have community spread is not based in science at all.
Dr. Fan, you're saying to do it county by county.
Absolutely.
In an interconnected country, the greatest free trade bloc that has ever been, interconnected, like Destiny said, you're saying we should do it county by county rather than doing it at one time in this country, which is more connected.
We tried that. We tried that at one time.
We had a half-hearted federal response, no meaningful guidance. The states and localities, in fact, made decisions on their own, and as a result, the virus has spread and has been allowed to bounce back and forth. And we haven't had a coherent federal response that could have smothered it before it spread across the country.
Bastiat, have you looked at the reopening guidelines?
That's why there's a value. The opening guidelines that the administration put out were thin soup, and they were designed to be implemented at the state's leisure, at the state's discretion. Instead of having federal leadership, we had federal abdication. And this idea that was for mitigating economic harm, if we'd smothered it early on with some serious federal leadership, instead of leaving it to spread among the states, then we wouldn't have had to deal with all that economic harm.
I get it. He wants okay. Wait, everybody stop. Everybody stop. Don't. Okay.
We need daddy government because you guys are the children.
Hey, I just said everybody. Okay, everybody. Okay. Doghouse has been wanting to say something. Doghouse?
Yeah, it's just really interesting to me that you think like them proposing before they even move on to a phase opening of downward trajectory of influenza-like illnesses reported in a 14-day period, and downward trajectory of COVID-like syndromic cases reported within a 14-day period. Oh, and the cases, they have to be a downward trajectory of documented cases within a 14-day period, or a downward trajectory of positive tests as a percent of total tests within a 14-day period. Oh, and hospitals, they have to treat all patients without crisis care, and robust testing program in place for at-risk healthcare workers, including emerging antibody testing. But, that wasn't really good for the gate criteria. And this is only one page of the reopening of America. If you want, we can go.
How many states were mandated to follow that?
Mandated?
None. Zero.
What is mandated? What is But how many of them followed it? How many of them followed it, though, is the question, right? Like, I mean, I know
Texas. You're the one bringing up the guidelines that were written on the CDC site.
Yeah. If it wasn't,
but that's what I'm saying, right? Like, so Texas did. I know Texas did specifically. I believe California did. I'd have to look more into all the specific ones. But you're telling me with like mandating, you obviously are saying that they should be mandated. So I'm saying which states didn't follow these guidelines then? Okay, you want to propose which ones did? I'm asking you then which ones didn't?
If 50 states didn't follow them, then that's a problem. Because as Bastiat said, we're an interconnected country. We have highways, people can travel, and they do travel. Some people, for instance, escaped New York, right? New York is having massive infection. Let's leave. That'll be a good idea for the suburbs or for the neighboring states. That happens. So unless we're having a unified front on this, it's going to fall apart. We're going to have hotspots that we're going to be playing whack-a-mole with people's lives. So,
although, I think as much as I agree with Prime, I can understand why our friends on the right have this approach, given their affection for states' rights on the last subject anyway.
Oh, man. Dude, you're cute, bro. At the end of the day, I might not agree with you, but at least you're a handsome guy while you're saying bullshit.
He has beautiful hair. Like, let's get that out.
I noticed that the angrier more he yelled, the bigger his hair got. Kind of like I don't know, like the raptor thing that does the frill. It's kind of like that.
Well, you guys have found my weakness. Thank you.
I was kind of curious about Lecture's
the poll,
point
though.
That
Bastiat, who won the poll? I thought
you rigged that poll.
I didn't rig the poll.
500 points.
Come on, just bullshit. Bullshit.
Mailing ballots printed by Russian Chinese agents. Just like Trump said.
Okay, IRI, you want to say something?
I was gonna say I'm curious about Lecture's point about just let the young people get it and make sure the older people are safe, right? That's what you were saying, Lecture. So, I mean, you're asking people like 65 and up to just stay home for the next couple of months. I mean, that's a hard sell for a lot of people out there. I mean, you're not making the sacrifice they are. I mean, how do you do that? Like, how do we keep them safe? Like, you literally have to keep them home, right?
Well, that's a lot more manageable than keeping everybody home.
We're not asking to keep everybody home. We're asking people to abide by certain rules so that we can all interact and safely function to some degree. Even go out to restaurants and eat outside as long as you follow certain rules.
Well, I wouldn't mandate or force elderly people or unhealthy people or people with health conditions that make them susceptible to this. That's the difference, I guess, between all of this is I'm not proposing forcing at the point of a gun or at the point of $1,000 fine, government power having the police state and having a huge police force go around and police people. I'm suggesting in terms of recommendations from the government, which is all that they should have ever have done. I'm not in favor of the authoritarian, tyrannical mandates and police state that you guys are all in favor of here. I think that the public health guidelines that should have been recommended would have been number one, if you're sick, stay home. Number two, if you're elderly or have a health condition, you should probably stay home. And then everybody else can continue to wash their hands a lot. And socially distance a lot, and we would have never have overwhelmed the healthcare system with those options. And I'm so sick of everybody else acting like they care about lives at this virtue signaling. Oh, well, I care about saving lives. I care about, you know what? There's a lot of evidence that the economic collapse that have come from these government lockdowns are going to kill a lot more people than the virus. So if you guys really cared about lives, you wouldn't be in favor of that.
No, wait. Okay. That's everybody can't say anything at the same time. Who wants to respond to that? Just raise your hand. Okay. I said raise your hand. I'll throw it to Destiny, then Prime.
Wait, Prime started talking first. You can go.
That was because of Trump's botched response to this. This economic downturn that we're facing was completely avoidable. There's all kinds of things we could have done. We could have put policies in place to support businesses and keep people on their payrolls instead of throwing them all on the unemployment payroll, which was the dumbest thing, the stupidest thing you could have done, right? Instead of doing that, we could have paid businesses, keep them on their payroll, done that across the board. We could have supported everyone. In this process, but we didn't. We made the dumb choice to allow our economy to fall. Right? You're saying that people have a choice. People don't have a choice. Some people have to leave their homes, right? And those people have loved ones. Those people have families they have to come home to, right? And people who may be compromised in some way or another. So we don't live in two separate tracks. You can't just say one group gets to go out, right? And good fucking luck. And the other group, they'll be protected. They'll be behind some hermetically sealed wall. That's not how it works in this country.
Yeah.
Just as a response to the to a response to the CDC guidelines earlier. So just in this article, under this framework, which he feels is a reasonable way of interpreting the CDC guidelines, this had to do with the 14-day downward trend in cases. A state wouldn't qualify as having a sustained decline in cases if it saw any dramatic spikes over the 14-day stretch. This would mean California, Florida, Massachusetts, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and Texas didn't exhibit sufficient progress during that time period. You can open the article, I think, in incognito mode. But like
that's the one talking about downward trajectory of documented cases within a 14-day period, correct? Just that one part, but there's two parts of that, no? Because I think this happened with Governor Dan Patrick, is people were saying that Governor Dan Patrick did not follow the guidelines, which is false, because if you look, there's a second part of that the news likes to leave out, which is it says, or downward trajectory of positive tests as a percent of total tests within a 14-day period. And if you look at Texas,
I don't know
downward trajectory.
I'll try to find like further information related to that. The second point was this idea that the lockdowns are causing harm to people. Of course they are, but that's because we're already in an unenviable state where we have to deal with a catastrophic issue. Like this is like saying that like giving somebody chemotherapy is bad because it's making them sick, so we need to stop. Nobody wants to lock down the economy. Nobody wants these lockdowns. Nobody wants people not working and on unemployment. Obviously, this is a disaster situation, but we kind of have to make the best of what we have because of where we're at now, because we didn't get on like any kind of testing or any kind of contact tracing when we knew this was going to be a problem. You know, fucking 7 months ago when Trump bragged about shutting down travel from China, but still let everybody come in and out of it anyway, and still let people come in from Europe for 2 more months before doing anything about it.
Well, Democrats wouldn't have done anything differently since they were the ones saying, "Hey, go out and party in China."
The first thing you learn,
what
do Democrats have to do?
Okay, Destiny. We gotta let him finish.
I'm so sick of hearing these criticisms of Trump when nobody was saying anything differently at the time. If you're going to criticize Trump for not doing something, presumably you could point to somebody who is saying something. All Trump did was listen to the public health experts. So if anybody screwed this up, it was all the public health officials up to and including Dr. Fauci.
Destiny. That's the Republican MO today now. Nothing, the president is responsible for nothing. And that's such a pitiful standard for leadership in this country. It really hurts to hear this, because not only do we expect, wait, you made your point. Not only do we have no expectations of our president now, but apparently we got no expectations of each other. All this tripe about how we love being American and how we value our fellow citizens and believe in the value of life, all of that has been proven to be nothing if we ask people to do so much as wear a mask in compliance with the law. It all goes out the window. Nothing about we. It's all about me. It's just fundamentally un-American.
I would like to agree with Lecture.
Okay. Destiny first.
I
then
think
Prime.
there should be some shared responsibility between the Republican president and the Democrat president when all of this broke out. I think that they're equally culpable. I don't know who the fuck was in charge of the country as a Democrat when this happened, but sure, they can have equal culpability as well.
Obama put in place a pandemic response team, and then Trump got rid of that, correct?
I don't think he got rid of the coronavirus response. I think there was
not the coronavirus response. Pandemic response team.
No, they all they did was some like bureaucratic readjustment.
No, they claimed that they just did a reshuffling, but the reality is that some of those key employees were actually let go. They try to do this bullshit. Oh, well, it was just a reshuffling, the same way that he was inspecting his bunker when the protests were happening outside. But that's bullshit. You can go and read specifically the type of reshuffling that happened. It's the type of reshuffling that happens when a corporation is trying to cut fucking chaff or whatever. When you're trying to cut away extra spending.
Having more bureaucrats wouldn't have helped, since the bureaucrats all got it wrong.
All the bureaucrats got it wrong?
One at a time.
I find it pretty interesting that even Dr. Fauci seems to be in line and says that he thinks that Trump did a pretty good job when it comes to handling the coronavirus. So should we just throw Fauci out, or is he still our go-to guy when it comes to COVID response?
I imagine
working for government said the president did it. Interesting.
I mean, I think of all people, Dr. Fauci is he's not a good government shill. Let's be honest here.
Notice how he's shown up. Notice how he's been at less and less of those briefings. Notice how he's been at less and less of those press conferences. Notice how the White House is constantly trying to slander him behind his back. Notice how Trump goes on stage and constantly gives advice that Fauci recommends against, whether he's promoting weird drugs or injecting UV fucking sunshine beams into your blood. Like, this idea that Fauci and Trump are on the same page is hilarious, when even in interviews Trump says, "Oh, well, me and Fauci, we disagree on something."
I'm just saying, why is Fauci doing it? If he's someone that you fucking like, you're just like, anything you want to say about COVID, we'll believe you, Fauci. But at the same time, he's also like, hey, Trump's doing a pretty good job. I agreed with when he did the China ban.
Because he has to play his position. What do you mean? Fauci can't just get out.
So you're saying that bureaucracy is inherently like a detriment to like how things are done in America?
No,
I'm saying that you have about
the
the level of understanding of how government works as I would expect any Trump supporter to have. Obviously, if you're working for the federal government, if you're working under the privilege of the executive branch,
you're not obligated to do so.
You're not obligated to, but that's not how real life works.
You can criticize somebody as long as you don't ad hominem. What do you mean?
Really? How did that work for Jeff Sessions? Really? How did
that
didn't get pardoned?
Okay.
Hold on. You can criticize Trump? What do you mean? As soon as you criticize Trump, this fucking baby is on Twitter fucking blasting you. How did that work for Sessions in his election? How did that work for Manafort, who didn't get any help from Trump, while his little buddy Flynn and fucking Stone, all got fucking bailouts from him in the form of commuted sentences or pardons or whatever? What are you talking about? You can go out and criticize the government any way you want. This is the worst type of government to criticize. Trump is absolutely vicious against you if you fall out of line at all.
It's suspect. Okay. Yep, suspect. You get to respond. What was that?
You actually legitimately think that Trump is anti-free speech? Really?
This is a retarded fucking counter. You're so fucking stupid.
No, I'm asking you honestly.
I'm trying to boil it down. You have a 4-year-old view of how government works. Like, I don't know what else to say.
Okay, so you, through your convoluted rapid fire bullshit, you're saying that Trump is anti-free speech and you got to play the game or else you're gone. Even though there's a
Yeah, that's actually, yeah.
It's funny that you say I'm anti-free speech when Trump is literally blocking books from being published and is literally.
Sushi, is your position that President Trump has not fired people for disagreeing with him?
Okay. I was muted. I was yelling into a muted mic. That's why. Okay, so that was my fault. I was yelling into a muted mic, and I just thought no one was listening to me. But I was trying to say before I muted everybody. Sorry, I was yelling into a muted mic. Happens to the best of us. We have hit our time limit. Everybody gets a 1-minute ending statement. I know we ended on a very heated point, but you can wrap it up with a 1-minute ending statement. You can also throw your outro out there. Again, sorry for muting myself. I honestly just thought no one was listening to me. I'm going to start this off with Prime K's because I know he's been wanting to say something for a while.
It's gone. Any case. Yeah, so we need a cohesive response to this. That we live in an interconnected country with free movement. Unless we are really advocating for blocking off states, shutting down highways, then there's no other way to do it. We need an interconnected response. We need a properly managed response, and it has to come from the federal government, or else it just won't work. So I'll leave that at that. I guess I can do my outro, correct?
Do your outro.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me here, Dylan. I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity, and I appreciate the people on the right who were kind enough to come and join us. I like last username, Suspect Sushi. I've talked to Doghouse, and I hope to talk to him more in the future, and maybe LTCRfan as well. But anyway, my name is Prime Kai, as you see on the screen, PRIMECYES. I'm a socialist streamer, and I do a lot of walk-on panels where audience members can come join in. Doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, you're welcome to be here. And also, anyone who's on this panel. So if afterwards you guys want to join me, because I will be streaming right after this, I'd love to have you as well. So thank you, everyone who participated, including our boys on the left. Thank you so much.
Okay, next is going to be LTCRfan.
Well, the whole debate that everybody just had about Fauci, somehow he won't criticize Trump because Trump, fire him. Fauci can't be fired. Fauci is a career bureaucrat. He's been a government bureaucrat for 35 years. He's not a political appointee. He's a career official. Trump cannot fire Fauci. And this whole thing, like the whole thing about, this should have been a federal response. This should have been a federal response. I specifically remember when Trump was actually talking about issuing a nationwide lockdown or even nationwide travel bans or something like that. All the Democrats came out and said states' rights and 10th Amendment and everything else. So you guys would all be saying Trump's an authoritarian and violating the Constitution if he had done a nationwide response. Trump was absolutely right to leave this up to the states. It was actually the Democrat governors that really screwed this up. Cuomo first amongst them. The real story of the coronavirus is all the Democrat governors who really, really screwed this up. Bastiat is wrong. I don't leave Trump out of my criticisms. I do criticize Trump. One of the primary reasons I criticize Trump is because he didn't follow his gut enough on this, and he listened to the public health officials too much. He basically did everything that the public health officials had recommended throughout this whole thing. There were definitely some very, 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 very big screw ups in this thing. And Trump listening to the public health officials was first and foremost among them, second only to Fauci's screw ups, including the beginning and lying to the American people that masks don't work. And they lied then, but we're supposed to believe them now. And all these Democrats, care so much about lives and stuff, but they support mass gatherings and everything else. And so there's just so much hypocrisy and inconsistencies on this, and just ignorance of basic epidemiology, all for political purposes. This is all 2020. This has been one of the greatest mass panics and mass hysterias the world has ever seen, driven by the media and the Democrat Party and all the leftists and every public health official that is a partisan Democrat and abuse their office for partisan political reasons. And thank you so much. It was good to be on here. Thanks a lot.
Happy to have you on, Lecture Fan. And Doghouse.
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of leave this where I ended up, began this, which is that in terms of mandatory mask orders, I think that if we look at the trend, I think the trend was going to continue up without the mask orders. We can look at it's a very interesting study to kind of look at, in terms of how Trump's response was and whether or not him wearing a mask would have any effect on people wearing masks. I don't know if you can make that link. I think it's really just pure speculation, honestly, one way or the other, whether he was wearing or not wearing a mask, and nobody wore a mask. I think it's just purely speculation. But I don't think the mandatory mask orders or laws specifically should be implemented. Should people wear masks? Sure. Do I think that corporations would continue to implement these mask policies? They probably would. But I just don't agree with making laws just to make laws. I feel like there needs to be a purpose behind that particular law, outside of just saying that, people don't wear masks. Well, people do wear masks. So anyways, to wrap up my conclusion, I guess, and kind of wrap up who I am the Doghouse Show. I stream typically Monday through Friday, but I have a newborn, so I don't really stream as much as I used to. But I stream Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, bring on guests from all over the different political spectrum. And I do genuinely have a pretty good conversation where it's about the guests. It's not about me debating them. It's a genuinely good conversation. I would encourage anybody to go check out the VODs, see that for themselves. I've had Dylan on, I've had a few other lefties on, and it's all about them, not about me. And so other than that, I think we had a great conversation. Bastiat, I'm going to have to make sure I get a soapbox for you next time we're on. I know you get a little bit emotional, and I get it, man. I get the hair sometimes, it just makes it a little bit upset. I get it. If I had hair like that, I'd get upset as well. So
I'll take it as a compliment rather than a dig.
Yeah, hey, there you go. Take it how you want it. But hey, I had a great conversation with all of y'all. I look forward to having some conversations moving forward with y'all as well. I'm very good. Yeah. So anyway.
Next is going to be Bastiat.
Right on. Well, hey, congratulations, by the way, on the new one, Doghouse. It's really cool, and all the best. So look, on this issue, the civil, as far as Fauci goes, the Civil Service Act does mean that President Trump can't fire him on no basis, but he certainly can fire him, quote unquote, with cause. He could build such a cause based on a response to Fauci's behavior and activities and recommendations. And in any event, he can certainly sideline Fauci, which would, prevent his ability to speak as publicly with as much authority to do as much good. So he can certainly sideline him, and he could eventually fire him, but he couldn't do it immediately under the Civil Service Act. So there's that. Beyond that, as far as this issue goes, I think the court in Jacobson versus Massachusetts, that case I mentioned where mandatory vaccines was discussed, I think said it very well. In every well-ordered society charged with the duty of conserving the safety of its members, the rights of the individual in respect of his liberty may at times, under the pressure of great dangers, be subject to such restraint enforced by reasonable regulations as the safety of the general public may demand. And why? Because real liberty for all could not exist under the operation of a principle that recognizes that each individual person can use their own properties as they see fit, regardless of the injury that may be done to others. Here, there's a clear third-party issue, right? Even if you think you are entitled to do it, at the end of the day, your body is an non-consenting vector for a dangerous disease that is asymptomatic for 2 weeks. So unless we have something approaching universal compliance, this thing is going to continue to spread, and that's why the force of law should be involved, and that's why I support it. So beyond that, I do want to thank you, Dylan, for the invite. I think this is one of my favorite panels I've ever done. It's a lot of fun. Thanks for managing it. Destiny, I'm really important. Prime, it was great speaking alongside y'all, and Doghouse, Sushi, last year's name, and of course LTCRfan. That was a real treat. I enjoyed that. So hope y'all have a good night.
Wonderful. I'm happy you had a good, wonderful time.
Hey, Dylan, can I apologize really quick for something? I was just going to
sure.
say, Destiny, I'm sorry for the CNN comment. That was a low blow. I shouldn't have said that, and I apologize for the CNN comment.
What was it? Which one was the CNN comment?
Where I said you're watching too much CNN. That was inappropriate, and I apologize.
Okay.
We're building bridges here. Destiny and LTCRfan are now best friends. LTCRfan will be the new Hassan. Okay, suspect.
I don't know. Like this bores me. It should be a states' rights thing. Herder, Confederate apologist, but yeah, Bastiat. Hey man, like I said, I like you, even though you're insinuating that I'm some kind of self-hating fucking Confederate apologist. But also, Destiny, this is the only time I'm going to be able to ever speak to you like verbally, and you actually listen to me, or else I'm just like another drone in your fucking chat. So I'm going to say it, and I mean this as nicely as possible because it was a dare. You're a soy boy cuck, and I don't like you, but I actually do. But the soy boy cuck part with the soylent drinking and all that. But actually, you're actually nicer than I thought you'd be? Question mark. Even though you called me a piece of shit and stupid and stuff.
Exclamation point.
Exclamation point. Wonderful. And
yeah, every Suspect Sushi, Swole Team 6, 99% of everybody in your chat fucking hates me. That's cool. I'm like the 1-800 dial a conservative on Dylan's panel, so you're probably going to hate me a lot more in the future.
Wonderful. Next is IRI.
All right. Well, this has been an experience. I love chatting with all these rock stars of the Twitch politics scene, as I said in the beginning. And even if I disagree with people so strongly, I still see everybody as people, and I love just getting to chat with people with different opinions and such. So thank you, everybody, for indulging me with that. As far as the masks thing, I'm scared to death about step number 2 and 3. Like I said, how are we going to get these people to take a vaccine, and twice if we can't even get them to wear a mask? And the same people that are so upset about government overreach with a mandate to wear masks were probably gleefully cheering on federal officers as they went 2-3 blocks away from a courthouse and just used force on people peacefully protesting or shooting fireworks at a limestone building. So I find that hypocrisy quite rich. But if I'd love to see many of you guys in my channel. I talk politics with a focus on Capitol Hill, the Senate, the House. There's a lot of exciting races. Make sure you guys go to vote.gov. Check your voter registration. We are 90 days away from this election. So make sure everything's in order and you get your mail-in ballot. I'll put my link in chat. Dylan, thank you. Have a good night.
No problem. Happy to have you on, IRI. And Destiny.
Unfortunately, the search for intelligent life continues after leaving Planet Conservative. None has been found, as continues to be. Fuck liking everybody and fuck civility and politics. I need people to wear masks. I need to get the fuck out of this horrible fucking country as soon as possible. And I can't do it when every other country in the world won't let Americans in because you motherfuckers are too busy getting sick. I don't care if you claim CNN is making bullshit up or it's all fucking fake news. At the end of the day, bodies in the ground are bodies in the ground. I wonder how many more Republican leaders need to die. Herman Cain is gone. Co-founder of Turning Point USA is gone. I wonder if Trump died of coronavirus, if it would still be some like giant hoax or some giant conspiracy. I'm not entirely sure. Who knows? We need a federal guideline for how to deal with this coronavirus shit. States obviously haven't done a good job at dealing with it on their own. The United States is singularly and uniformly a fucking embarrassment to the world right now. This is not the way that I wanted to lead the world in coronavirus infections and deaths. So I think it would be a good idea to have some federal level unified response to deal with this. It's been my position, but I mean, we're not going to get any kind of leadership from Trump because he's too busy blaming an imaginary deep state that hasn't existed for who the fuck knows how long, even though he's been in charge of appointments and government for 4 fucking years. Apparently he still can't get Obama out of the back of his fucking mind. You can find me at twitch.tv/Destiny.
Wonderful. What kind of content do you find over there?
I'm usually doing left-leaning soy boy debate cucks or whatever, where people accuse me of dishonest debate tactics because they've never critically thought about a single thing they've considered in their entire fucking lives.
Wonderful. And finally, last username.
Okay, so on the mask issue, on the ethics issue, I consider it, your response. I consider getting someone else sick an act of aggression. And I think that's true even if you don't know you're sick. I think you're responsible for knowing whether or not you are sick and then doing what you need to do to stop other people from catching that disease. Now, practically speaking, you can't be 100% certain that you won't do that. So I think that we have to accept that there are certain, we're going to have to take some kind of precautions to prevent that from happening, given that you can't know for certain whether or not you're sick. In the case of this disease. So I think libertarians, I see so many libertarians just like being completely anti-mask, and it doesn't make sense to me. Libertarians should be the ones saying like, you need to take personal responsibility for not getting other people sick. More generally, I'm going to be a bit of a snooty Canadian and say it's kind of disappointing how this topic ended up just being, Trump versus Democrats, and that's kind of happened with every topic that we talked about tonight. I think you can criticize what Trump did in this the pandemic, but there's so many other things that went wrong with the government and various other governments and world organizations and stuff. Like there's so much more detail that we could be exploring, but it seems like most people are only concerned with spinning this as like, screw Trump or screw the Democrats, and to think of all the brain cells that could be spent instead of doing that, actually solving problems like this. It's kind of sad. And this is why I'm a libertarian, because I think politics just makes it so difficult to actually solve problems. And if you want to find out more about that, then, come check out my channel, and I'll try to talk about actual solutions to problems and avoid the red versus blue politics.
Wonderful. I again thank everybody for coming on, everybody for watching. I hope everybody thought I was a somewhat fair and consistent moderator, except for the one time.
Do we do shout outs? Is that supposed to be our final shout out?
Yeah. Do you want to shout somebody out?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Can I give a shout out to my wonderful freedom of speech loving President Trump that says via executive order he's going to ban TikTok? Thank you.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. Okay.
Okay. But again, thank you everybody for coming on. Thank you everybody to watching, and thank you to everybody who decided to follow today. I really appreciate it. I passed 4,000 followers. That's pretty cool. And I hope to see you back here next Friday, 8 p.m. EST. We are here every Friday, 4 conservatives, 4 left-wingers going head-to-head. I appreciate everybody stopping by. You are free to talk in here or whatever, but I'm going to head out. See you guys later.
It's called the U.S. flag, you stupid fuck. This is the only flag that the United States federally has and recognizes. Why the fuck are you acting like a different